Mashama Bailey was born in the Bronx, but also spent time with family in Georgia, where relatives taught her the art of Southern cooking.
She and her business partner, John, turned an old Greyhound bus station into the Grey. Time magazine has recognized it as one of the world's greatest places for food and drink.
Food and Wine magazine recently placed the Grey on its list of the world's best restaurants.
And the Beard Award goes to Mashama Bailey.
I remember the smells in my grandmother Geneva's kitchen. It smelled warm. It smelled like sugar and honey, grits and bacon in the morning, biscuits. It smelled like greens cooking on the stove. It smelled like cheese and pork and just good food. I gotta be honest, I didn't really identify myself as a Southern cook. But I never really was looking at French chefs or American chefs for inspiration. I was always looking at my family because I thought that they were the best cooks that I knew. I always was looking for dishes that represented my grandparents, my grandmothers in particular. All those things really influenced my outlook. I think the reason why I cook Southern food is because my grandmothers are my anchors. By doing that, it allowed me to really look at what Southern food is, what Black food is, what American food is, and it also allowed me to accept my own journey. I was a career changer when I'd started cooking, had already gone to college and gotten a degree and started a career in social work. And I thought it was going to be so fulfilling. I thought helping people was really going to keep me centered and engaged. And I thought I was going to change the human condition. It really became clear to me very early on that that was not my passion. What was my passion was making people happy and keeping people fed, and also receiving some praise for it. Growing up in the South and moving to the North, learning to cook in France, and coming back to New York City in order to really hone my skills has really given me a unique perspective that I want to share with you. I want to demystify Southern food. When I think of Southern food, I think of a region that encompasses the Appalachian Mountains and the Gulf. I think of all the ingredients that are grown and celebrated there. I think the people who were forced to live there and the people who were pushed out really understood how to grow the food and really had a heavy influence in what we call Southern food today. Being in Savannah and cooking at the helm of a Greyhound bus station that was segregated is really special. It's amazing. I think about how I am in a really unique position to tell a really unique story from a perspective that no one really wanted to give room to before. And I often think about my grandmothers and my great-grandmothers and great-grandparents who could not even roam through a building like that freely, or would be harassed in a space like that. So there's an obligation. And I'm doing it on a platform that amplifies the story. Being Black in America, being an African American, we weren't able to document our recipes. So we relied on oral histories in order to keep our traditions alive. And I have the ability and resources to actually continue that conversation. And I think it's a real privilege. This is for you if you want to learn how to cook authentic Southern food and understand the history behind recipes, ingredients, and techniques that have survived generations. You're going to learn how to braise, pickle, cold smoke, and layer ingredients in ways that will hopefully change the way you think about Southern food. I am shaping the future of Southern food by rooting myself in my family history and using the ingredients that are grown locally to express that. The first thing that I hope that you do when you finish this masterclass is to not be afraid to explore your own personal cooking style. I'm Mashama Bailey, and this is my masterclass. I'm gonna make succotash. I think it's really a quintessential American dish. It's where the old world meets the new world. It's been around since the 17th century when Europeans came to this country. They were introduced to corn and lima beans by the Native Americans. But what makes it Southern? The addition of tomato, which grows well in the South, and also the addition of okra. Okra is an ingredient that originated in Africa, and it came to America by enslaved Black people by way of the Middle Passage. Enslaved Black people grew this ingredient, which is responsible for a lot of dishes that we consider to be Southern. Adding an ingredient like okra to succotash really specifies where it's from and who's making it. Succotash is really a representation of American food and a bit of a melting pot of a few different cultures brought together in one dish. Let's talk a little bit about what's in front of us. We have okra that's going into our succotash. We have corn that was introduced by the Native Americans. We have lima beans that's also introduced by the Native Americans. We have tomatoes. We have serrano chili peppers that are de-seeded and diced. We take the seeds out so we can control the heat. We have white onion that's diced, bell peppers, celery, some minced garlic, butter. We're also going to season our succotash with black pepper and a little bit of salt. And I just have a little water here in case I'm not getting enough water from my vegetables, and I want to make sure that everything has an opportunity to incorporate. So let's get started. We're going to heat our butter in a heavy bottom pan. Whoa. I'm fine. It's not the first stove that's blew up in my face, so it won't be the last. We have a Dutch oven here. You can use any heavy bottom pan that you have. Sort of a wide pan works best for a dish like this. It gives you an opportunity to allow the vegetables to sweat. It gives you room to add water if you want. So it's nice to have some room to sort of move everything around. We're gonna put this on a medium heat, and we're gonna add in our butter. You can use any fat that you want. You can use a little bit of bacon fat, lard, which is probably a more traditional fat to use for a dish like this. You can also use olive oil if you want to keep it vegan. It's really up to you and your preference. So once the butter starts to melt, what we want to do is add in our sort of base vegetables, the part that's really going to season the dish. Here we're going to use what they would call in Creole cooking, Holy Trinity. So we'll start out with the onion. Bell pepper. celery. We'll coat these vegetables. So Holy Trinity is really the basis of a lot of Creole dishes that come out of New Orleans. New Orleans cuisine is a mixture of Native American, French, and African. And you'll find these aromatics really as the base of a lot of things like jambalaya and gumbo. And it kind of helps to create a thread that goes through that cuisine in general. So they take a lesson from the French, and instead of adding carrot to their mirepoix, they add a bell pepper to it. And it really makes this very specific flavor profile. So you eat gumbo, you kind of always have the same base. You eat jambalaya, you always have the same base. And those, because of this Holy Trinity, it really kind of brings you back to it. Dirty rice, those dishes always have these 3 ingredients at the core of them. So we're starting to smell the celery, and we're starting to smell the onions and the bell pepper. We want our fat to really coat these vegetables and sort of cook them down. I like to layer my seasoning. So this would be a good point for me to add some salt. And what this salt is going to do is going to extract the existing water that's in the celery and bell peppers and onions. It's going to concentrate the flavor, and it will also limit me from using more salt at the end. So I like to layer salt as I go because I use less salt, because I'm really concentrating the flavor of that ingredient at that time. It's harder to do it when everything is already in the same pot, because then you tend to just taste the salt instead of really enhancing the flavor of the individual ingredients. This is a great dish to cook on a Wednesday. It's a one-pot meal. You can throw a roasted chicken in the oven and serve it alongside it. You can just have this over rice. It's probably a dish that my ancestors or older family members don't even want to talk about anymore, because they probably had it a lot. And it's really prevalent in the late summertime when we have a lot of okra and we have a lot of tomatoes and we have a lot of field peas. And so you start to eat this dish a lot in sort of the warmer months of the summer in August and September. So we're starting to smell everything now. And with that, we want to start to continue to layer. So I'm gonna add my garlic here, and we'll bloom that garlic. I like to let garlic sort of open up and blossom before I add ingredients to it. It just needs time to stand on its own a little bit and let everybody know it's there and kind of come alive a little bit. Then I like to add the rest of my ingredients. Once you start to smell that garlic, and it doesn't take long, then you can continue to layer. We'll add our chilies. Spicy peppers, peppers in general, really grow well in hot environments. And adding a little bit of spice or heat to this dish really helps your brain go to that particular region. It really gives this dish a more traditional feel, because all these ingredients are growing together at the same time. The corn is growing together, the lima beans, the peppers, the tomatoes. So it really is just a melting pot. So you are taking all these ingredients that grow together, and the saying is, if they grow together, they go together. So you want to add layers to it, and peppers help to add layers to this dish. I'm going to reduce this heat a little bit, and I'm going to cut the okra because I want to add the okra now. So I would like to add the okra now because it acts really as a thickening agent. Okra has this slime to it that people either love or hate. But what that slime does is it helps to coagulate things. It helps to bring things together. So okra is really great in stews because that property that it has, that slime that it has, kind of cooks out and it allows all the food to sort of melt together. So if you're doing a melting pot of something, okra really is a very natural ingredient to add to it. Okra was always on the table in the summertime. My mother's from Georgia. She's from North Georgia. And so we would often eat okra in any kind of way you can think of. We always had it in succotash. We would have it in a gumbo. We would also have it just in rice, and more of like a purloo, which is okra, rice, and a little bit of Holy Trinity. We would fry it. Frying it was a special occasion because frying okra takes a lot of work. So it's easier to cut it up and put it in a stew than to sort of like batter it and fry it. But that was a special occasion. We would also char okra. My mom would char it and put it with chicken. And what charring does, it takes away a lot of that slimy texture that people associate with eating okra. And the way you can char okra is you can slice it in rings like I'm doing, or you can slice it down the middle. Place the cut side down on a hot cast iron pan, and it sort of dries it out. Charred okra is great with a little salt, maybe a little lemon juice. It's a good snack. Okra grows in the hottest months of the year, and a good way to save it could be pickling. Another great way that you can save okra is freeze it. So it really is a sort of versatile ingredient. And pickling okra is surprisingly delicious because it stays crispy, it stays really green, and it has a great texture. So it's a great way to store it. And adding a little pickled okra to a stew really ups the acidity level of something. So it's a good ingredient to sort of experiment with. So if you see okra, you can cut it up and freeze it. You can pickle it with a little bit of vinegar and sugar and water. This is my favorite application of okra. I really love okra cooked and stewed down. So as soon as the okra kind of hits the pan, you can kind of see the sliminess, for lack of a better word, sort of coating over the other ingredients. It almost looks like a spider web. It's starting to release into the pan, starting to incorporate with all of the other ingredients. And when we begin to mount everything else into the pan and add a little water, the water and the juice from the tomatoes and the sweetness of the corn and the water from the corn is going to start to break that up a little bit. Right now, it smells like summertime in Waynesboro, Georgia. It smells just green and fresh. It smells like okra, you know? It smells like childhood. Those peppers are really kicking in. That garlic has bloomed really nicely. So you're really starting to smell almost everything that's in the pot, which is great. So this is where I want to just add a little bit of salt. And I'm just lightly seasoning these ingredients because I'm going to continue to layer as we go on. So this bright greenness of the okra is where I want to add the remainder of the ingredients. So we'll go on with our tomatoes. These are heirloom tomatoes, some yellow, some green, some red, and orange cherry tomatoes. Gives a nice complexity. It makes it beautiful. It's just beautiful to look at. You can find these in your local grocery store. You can also use large hothouse tomatoes. If it's tomato season, that's the best time to do this dish. It's right in the summertime. We're gonna add our lima beans. These lima beans have already been cooked, and we're just gonna continue to stew them down. You can find okra in your freezer section. You can also find lima beans in your freezer section. And usually when you find lima beans in your freezer section, they've already been blanched, they've already been cooked. So let's talk a little bit about just the idea of blanching. So blanching is a way to cook vegetables or fruit and to cook them in water, to lock in the color of them and create a consistent texture with them, because you're cooking them at a certain temperature, and the blanching aspect is that you're taking them from the hot water and you're putting them into cold water to stop the cooking process. So you totally control when the food is done cooking. Lima beans are great, but you do need to blanch them because they go bad really quickly. So fresh peas, field peas, black-eyed peas, lima beans, pink lady peas, all these peas really grow late hot months. They're great fresh. You have to take them out of the shell really early, and you have to freeze them. The best way to freeze them is to blanch them first and then freeze them, because they'll last longer and they'll be easy on the other end to incorporate into your stews. The basic ingredients for a succotash is lima beans and corn. Succotash really means broken corn. So in order for you to really have a succotash, you have to have some form of corn in it. Maybe it's hominy, right? If you want to get creative and you live in Texas, maybe you're using hominy and you're using chilies and you're using pork. That can also be considered a succotash. It's really a melting pot of ingredients with a corn base. Lima beans and corn are the two most popular ingredients that really identify a succotash. I mean, this really just screams summertime. Like, look at these colors. It's like yellow and green and red and orange. It smells delicious. That okra is really breaking down and making everything kind of hold together. I'm gonna add just a little bit of water here. That's about a half a cup. This water is going to really help emulsify the butter that we used early on in this dish. It's going to coat those vegetables along with the okra. Going to add another layer of salt. Some black pepper. Another quick little stir, make everything happy. We're gonna cover this so a lot of the steam doesn't escape and we can retain some of the liquid that's in the pan. So it's been about 35 minutes and we're gonna check our succotash. Looks really good. The liquid is nice and thick. Water and butter and the okra really help to sort of thicken this up. I think we're almost ready to plate. I'm gonna chop a little parsley to add on top. Just gonna add a little color and a little brightness with fresh parsley. It's a nice way to brighten up long cooked items, is adding some fresh herbs at the end. So we're gonna choose parsley because it just makes the most sense for me. It goes really well with the tomatoes and the corn and the lima beans. When butter was really expensive and not readily available, we used a lot of pork fat in a dish like this. We would probably even put pork in a dish like this. But today we have options and we can make these dishes as light as we want to. And maybe that's also a little bit about demystifying Southern food. As we evolve and we learn more about different ingredients and we learn how to incorporate them with the ingredients here, we can sort of change the narrative. So adding different fats to traditional dishes, just lighten them up. It still makes the food Southern, but it just adds, it just makes it a little bit more healthy. If I were at the restaurant, I would probably pick this up and turn it over into this big bowl, but I won't do that. We can take our time and ladle out as much as we want. I would serve this family style and eat this on the side alone as a vegetable. I would also eat it over rice. You can probably have it with a nice piece of cornbread. We'll chop up some of our parsley and garnish it on top. And there you go. Let's hit it with a little black pepper. Black pepper really reads Southern food to me. Growing up with my mom, coming from Georgia, she didn't use a lot of different spices. Her spice cabinet really consisted of warmer spices like allspice and cinnamon, but she also used black pepper, salt, and cayenne pepper. That was her sort of range of spices. And I think she did that because that was her mother's range of spices. So when I think about different Southern cooks, they really use salt and pepper. And they use them at different places for different reasons. And black pepper here really helps invoke the tradition of the dish for me. So I like to use a decent amount of black pepper in a succotash. And parsley elevates it. It just brightens up those stewed down flavors. It adds a little bit of pop, it adds a little bit of acid and some freshness to these stewed vegetables. I hope that this motivates you to go out and create a dish very similar to this. Try your freezer section. See if there's lima beans in there. Look for okra. I hope that this helps to make it simple for you and you feel empowered to go out and create dishes that invoke your childhood, and hopefully succotash is one of them. Pork is really a major part of Southern cooking. You think of bacon, you think of lard, you think of smoking whole pigs. Pork is really resilient, it's really forgiving. There's a lot of parts of the pork that you can save, you can smoke, you can use the fat. If you have a whole pig, usually it's raised by a few different families. It's hard for one family to eat the whole pig before it spoils. It's a very communal product, and I think when you think about Black cooking in America, you really think about big pork roasts. You know, there's a saying that we have called high on the hog. So if you can eat the best parts of the pork, then you are doing well in life. Pork shanks are considered the ham hock. They're a fatty part of the pork ankle, which holds a lot of marrow, which is really good for braising, and it holds a decent amount of meat. But it's a highly worked part of the body, and because this meat is so tough, braising is just a great technique for it. When you braise a piece of meat like this, you can incorporate different vegetables and starches to really fill out the meal. Right in front of me, I have some fresh pork shanks that have been skinned, and they're just a fresh piece of meat. You can see that there's a nice line of marrow right down the middle of the bone, and that's really great to emulsify into sauces. And next to it, we have a brined pork shank. And brining is a process where you immerse something into liquid that has salt, and it usually has aromatics in it. These have been brined for over 24 hours, and then they were pulled out of brine and set to dry in the refrigerator on a rack for another 24 hours. I want to show you what it looks like when it comes out of brine. Our technique of cooking this will be to sear it. And if we were to take it out of brine and put it immediately in the pan, it won't sear properly. It's too wet. The liquid around it will evaporate and we won't really get a beautiful crusty outside. So drying it really will help facilitate a beautiful sear on it and a beautiful look to it and help to really render some of this fat and skin that's on the outside of the shank. We are going to sear off this pork shank to begin our braise. I'm using a Dutch oven. You want to use a heavy bottomed vessel to really have an even distribution of heat and to help to insulate all of the liquid that will accumulate inside of your Dutch oven. So this has been heating up, and we'll pour a little blended oil here to see how hot it is. And you want to just about smoke and get it that hot because this is such a large piece of meat. By the time you get it in the pan, it's immediately gonna cool down. So you want the oil to start to smoke a little bit before you place in your pork. A great substitute for blended oil, if you don't have access to it, is peanut oil. Canola oil is great. Corn oil is good. Vegetable oil also has a high smoking point. Okay, I think we're pretty close. You can go in a little hotter, but this is okay. So the way this sounds is right where you want it. There's some splattering going on. It's a little loud, a little hard to talk over. It's at a controllable temperature. We're not gonna cook this too fast. We're gonna get nice brown coloring on these shanks. In the meantime, let's make a sachet. We're gonna use a little cheesecloth. We're going to add our spices into this cheesecloth, tie it up, and we can throw it into our pot. We can get all the flavors that are within this cloth without having to fish these ingredients out later. So our sachet is gonna have a teaspoon of peppercorn, some allspice, and bay leaf. You're going to fold it over once, almost like you're folding a letter. Fold it over again. Then you're going to close that letter toward the middle. And again, we have some butcher twine handy to help keep this shut. A sachet is a great way to introduce herbs into your cooking, like parsley or chervil or thyme. So it's a great little trick that we often use. Give these a rotation. There's cane syrup in this braise, so you're gonna get really dark marks of caramelization. That's okay. That's what's to be expected. That's why I wanted to show you this particular recipe, because these flavors really help deepen the dish. These dishes you can do ahead of time. Braising, marinating. You can hold these dishes way in advance. So these are great dishes to do for large parties. It's something that you can make for a dinner party, have heating in the oven, and really put out for a number of guests. We want to get color on all sides. We really want to sear off the skin, render the fat surrounding the pork shank. We're gonna deglaze our pan really quickly. We just poured out the fat that was in there, and we're gonna deglaze it with some onions to pick up the fond that's on the bottom of the pan. So all these bits are gonna attach to the pieces of onion. We're also gonna hit it with a little bit more cane syrup. Gonna caramelize some of this sugar. Smells like pancakes in a good way. Gonna hit it with a little bit of white wine now. And we're gonna let that cook down. These pork shanks smelled amazing while they were in the pan. You could smell the thyme and garlic, the caramelization from the cane syrup really sort of shining through. What you want is uniform coloring, but this coloring really aids in the end product. We're gonna add liquid to it. It's gonna enhance the flavor. It's gonna enhance the broth. We're gonna put in our sachet. I'm smelling onions and I'm looking for the wine to get a little bit sweeter on the nose before I add back in my pork and before I cover it with broth. We'll go back in with our shanks. And here we have some pork stock just really heating up and staying hot. I'm going to pour that over. Just want them to just about come up to the top of the shanks. And this is what we want when everything's sort of happy and really bubbling before we actually put it in the oven. Cover. Wow, these guys are doing really great. The liquid has reduced significantly, which is awesome. And it's really pulling away from the bone really nicely. We're gonna set these off to the side and reduce the liquid. You smell the onion, you really smell the bay leaf and the allspice. Those onions have really cooked down nicely. So I'm going to put this on a medium flame to really get it going and let it reduce to about half for another 15 minutes. One of the best things about creating these larger dishes that you can share with people is that you spend time with different generations and you start to learn about the history of your family, the oral history of your community. And so sitting at a table with your family, eating a meal like this really represents community to me. Wow, this is really looking great. We're going to put our pork shanks in here in this reduced sauce, just to get them nice and coated. I love the way this looks, so I'm going to cover it and keep it really low while we prepare the collard greens. My mother cooked the best collard greens. My grandmother cooked better collard greens. It was one of the quintessential dishes that really remind me of my childhood. But I never really liked collards growing up. They were a little too bitter for me. They were a little too soft. So I was well into my 20s until I really started to appreciate collards. And I went to visit my grandmother, and she was making collards like she normally does, but she had a piece of pork in it, and it was just not any cut of pork, it was the pigtail. And it was so delicious. It was slimy and gelatinous, and the greens were chewy and seasoned to perfection, and it really changed my whole perspective. And even when my mother and I went back to New York City, we tried to mimic those collard greens, but we failed. But it was a good failure. It was all about experimenting. And so one of the things that really reminds me of the South is smoke. And one of the dishes that really reminds me of my childhood is collard greens. So I wanted to do a version of collard greens that incorporated those two things without adding any sort of protein to it. So what we're gonna do is we're going to smoke the greens themselves. And we will layer the flavors of onions and shallots and a little bit of olive oil in order to sort of mimic that mouthfeel that I remember when I had my grandmother's collard greens that were stewed down with pigtails. In a cast iron pan, we have some wood chips. Now, if you have a smoker at home, by all means, use your smoker. But a lot of us don't have that. And so I wanted to show a variation of how you can use this technique at home. You have to have a really good exhaust system because you are creating smoke. So this is really not a dish for the trepidatious or the weary. You really want to have some control. And I think you can do it. I trust you. I think you know yourself. So feel free to give it a try. In a cast iron pan, we have it really hot. And what we're doing is really toasting these wood chips. So we're not directly putting fire onto the chips, but we are introducing heat in a controlled way, which is going to have these chips start to smoke. While that's going, I would like to show you how to clean collard greens. Collard greens grow really large heads, really large bunches. I like the smaller ones. They tend to be a little bit sweeter and more tender. What you want to do is really de-stem them. So you want to remove this center stem from the greens. They tend to be a little fibrous. So you want to pull those. You want to kind of give yourself a little room, disconnect the bottom leaf. You want to pull down like so. I'll show you another one. And we're gonna put it in water. Really get a lot of dirt here, so you really wanna focus on cleaning there when you clean collards. We're going to make sure these are incorporated and fully underwater. And what happens is that the dirt falls to the bottom. You want to make sure you clean collards at least twice in big pools of water and then allow them to sort of sit so the dirt will fall down to the bottom. At the restaurant, we didn't have a smoker for a long time, so we used to smoke them inside on the line, and we used a method very similar to this. But like I said in the beginning, we have a very good exhaust system. So this, you can see how much smoke is coming from here. So you really want to make sure it's not going to smoke up your apartment or set off any alarms. One way to check if you've properly washed collards, taste them. You can feel your hands when you pull them out of water. So if your hands feel a little dirty, or if the water is really dirty, then you want to wash them again. You want to wash collards until the water is clear. Okay, this is looking really good. And if you can see in here, I have just a little piece of aluminum foil and I've poked some holes in it. And that's just to keep the chips aerated and allow them to continue to smoke. It's not very pretty, but it's effective. Fire needs airflow. Smoke needs airflow. So you want to make sure that you're putting your collards in a perforated pan and you're putting your chips in something that they can breathe in so that there's airflow. So once they're all brown and really charred, and you can see as I'm stirring, they're ready to sort of light on fire. There's some ambers there. And that's gonna retain the smoke while we are here. If I keep it going, it will light on fire. So once you have some ambers on your chips, you're gonna put it in your base of your makeshift smoker, and you're gonna pop your greens on top. I'm covering it with a rag so I can sort of keep as much smoke in here as possible. And you're gonna let this sit for about 20 minutes. This is what we would call a cold smoke. It's smoking off heat. The smoke is indirect, and it really sort of allows us to add smoke to the greens without cooking them. If I was smoking a protein or something a little denser than a vegetable like a leaf or collard greens, I would smoke it in a smoker that actually cooks it at a certain temperature. So we're not cooking the collard greens, we're just introducing smoke to them, almost like we would introduce salt to something. You're introducing the element of smoke without introducing heat. You can cold smoke a lot of things. Crudos are really good to smoke. All types of vegetables are good to cold smoke. You can cold smoke cream or even oil. So it's a really great technique to sort of introduce a very Southern theory or Southern cooking technique to your cooking. I only like to smoke these collard greens for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I think if you smoke them any longer than that, they really get bitter and the smoke makes them taste burnt almost. But when you're smoking things hot, you cook them for hours. But I think when you're cold smoking, really less is more. If you haven't set off any smoke alarms, then we're ready for the next step. Even if you have set off a smoke alarm, it's fine. What's the big deal? So we're gonna add some olive oil in our pan, and we're going to saute some leeks and some shallots. Remember, we are trying to mimic a pigtail. So we're gonna use a decent amount of fat in this recipe. We're also going to use the sweetest onions that we can find. I love using leeks in this dish because they are really sweet once they're caramelized. They're probably one of my favorite onions to eat very cooked down. When braising collards, it usually takes an hour or so. So you actually want something that is going to develop better in flavor and break down and melt in your mouth. And using leeks in this dish allows them to kind of integrate into the dish very well. They get really sweet, really caramelized, and they just add that body like that gelatinous pig skin would add to these greens. Seasoning in stages. So we're going to season our aromatics with a little bit of salt. It helps to release the water. It helps to break them down and infuse flavor. You're gonna cook these down a little bit. Really just start to sweat them. Our smoking is pretty much over. Gonna lift these up and see how they look. Not a huge drastic change in color, which is great because we don't want to cook them, but they're a little damp, which means that they have steamed a little bit. And some of the water in these greens have been released. And that will allow the smoke to infuse them. So that's what you want. They're a little warm to touch, and they smell very, very smoky. But they also smell like raw collard greens. If they only smelled like smoke, then maybe you put a little too much smoke in them, but if they still smell like collard greens, then we're on the right track. So we're going in our pot. You can see the dampness on the bottom of the pan. That's exactly what we want. I'm going to add a layer of salt here. And I'm going to add more olive oil. All in all, I think you need about a half a cup of olive oil. I'm gonna stir to incorporate. Make sure the olive oil is coating all the greens. Make sure the salt is getting everywhere. Collard greens have a lot of water in them naturally, so you don't normally need to add water to these greens in order to braise them, but I like to add just a little bit because I like a little extra pot liquor in the bottom of the pot. And what that pot liquor is really just the seasoning, the juices from the braised greens. Many people use that to dip cornbread in or eat over rice. Some people drink it, but it really is all of the essential nutrients that are in the greens. They are captured in that pot liquor. So I like to add a little bit of water in the bottom just to ensure that I have enough to go around. I can smell that smoke still. It's faint, which is great. And I can also smell the collard greens now. So now that I've added some heat to the greens, you really start to smell them permeate through the dish. I can hear it coming up to a boil. I'm gonna turn it down to a simmer. I'm gonna cover it and let it cook for 45 minutes before I check it. I'm gonna taste the greens. The greens are tender, so that means they're done. A little smoky, which is great. Taste the olive oil. You taste the shallots. You taste the leeks. I think we're ready. So we're gonna grab our pork out of the oven and we're going to plate up our dish. This really sparks like wonderful conversation, and it really speaks to cooking dishes that are really traditional. It really focuses on modern techniques like cold smoking vegetables and understanding where you came from, understanding where you are right now really can help shape your ideas for the future generation. And creating a dish like this really helps me to think about that and focus on where I want to go, where my cooking style wants to go. So I hope that you at home will be able to use some of these techniques and really hone in things about your family and your ancestral history that you really love to share with people in the present and also to the future. We're gonna put down a bed of collard greens. And we're gonna leave a little pot liquor on the bottom of the plate. And I'm just hoping that my grandmother would appreciate these greens. I know she'd try them, but I would hope that she would love them. So we're gonna put a little bit of pork on the plate. Keep her interested. We're gonna add a little sauce on top. This braising liquid is just nice and reduced. You really taste the cane syrup, really taste the onions. It's a nice way to serve this dish family style. Oh God, this is a disaster. Stay. Listen, your family don't care if it's messy, they just care if it's delicious. So we don't have to worry too much about making it perfect. The meat is falling off the bone. We have braised pork shanks with collards. All right, I'm getting goofy. We have braised pork shank with smoked collards. This dish is one of my favorite dishes that we serve at the Gray. These ingredients come from the water, and African Americans have a deep connection to the water. We think of the Middle Passage when we think of water. We think of cleansing and rebirth when we think of water. In our mother's wombs, we're in water. So there's a connection to life. And we also have a connection to pain. So there's this full circle that water represents for us in our community. And so a dish like this really speaks to that because we have shrimp, we have fish, we have broken pieces of rice, which are called rice midlands. Traditionally, this would probably be a very inexpensive dish. For Black folks in the South, there wasn't a lot of money to afford really good ingredients, but we were able to build rods and go out and fish. So these are the foods that really nurtured us and allowed us to sit around the table and tell our stories. For our seafood, we have shrimp, and we also have some red snapper that I will show you in a little bit. But right in front of me, I took those shrimp shells and made a stock out of. So we reallocated those shells. We're gonna start off with some olive oil, about 2 tablespoons. And we're gonna put in some celery, some shallots, and some onion. I really like using shallots and onions because they taste differently. Shallots are a little bit sweeter than onion. They break down a little bit more, they melt, and onions retain their structure in the dish. I'm gonna use a little bit more olive oil because as you're going to see as we go on, we're going to add more ingredients to this, and we need a little bit more oil to coat. The onions are starting to break down. The smell is really delicious. And that sweet celery is starting to really permeate. Shrimp stock is something that really you shouldn't be intimidated by. It's simply taking the shells and topping them off with water and adding some of your favorite ingredients to it. You can add onions to it, celery, fennel, and it's a great stock to keep in your freezer if you really love seafood. You can use it in a seafood boil if you want it to. You can use it in a pasta sauce. So it's really versatile, and it just adds a nice deep layer of flavor. And this stock is gonna help us flavor our rice. So we are going to cook the rice grits like we would a risotto. We're gonna add wine, we're adding aromatics, and we're going to add the stock in layers. So that is a very traditional way to cook arborio rice. And so using that technique and New World ingredients really helps to elevate the view of Southern cuisine. We're gonna sweat these down a little bit, And we want them to go a little bit past translucent. We want them to actually soften up. I'm starting to really smell the shallots now. I'm smelling the pungency of the shrimp stock in the background. And smelling at this phase really starts to engage your senses, but it also starts to have you think about what else you want to add, right? So you're smelling these ingredients at the very beginning stages, which sort of helps you think about what the end result is going to be. So now could be the time that maybe you would want to add some bacon to this, or maybe you would want to add some chicken skin or something. You'll have those flavors layered for the dish in the end. So paying attention at this phase really could help you add some complexity to dishes that you're experimenting with at home. Okay, we're getting close. Smelling good. I like to use olive oil in this dish because it's a lighter fat. It lends to that Italian nod of cooking risotto. I think most people would cook risotto with butter, but we're going to change it a little bit and start it off with a little bit of olive oil. Okay. So now we have our rice grits. The story that I learned about rice grits were that they were the broken pieces that were given to enslaved Africans. You would buy the rice by the grain. You would also buy pepper by the corn. So if you could not produce a full grain of rice, it wasn't really worth that much. So this was really sort of like a supplement that was passed on at a cheaper rate. So it was often fed to enslaved Africans. And part of that story is why I love using it. So here we're gonna coat all the rice, and we wanna toast it a little bit. It's going to create a nutty flavor for the rice. And that smells really good. It just smells like grounded and rooted, a little bit nutty. It's a great idea when you are making a risotto style rice dish like this to have your liquid already heating up. It helps to incorporate it more evenly and faster, which is, we're always trying to move a little bit faster when we can. So it's a great way to do that. If you do it when the liquid is cold, it just takes a long time for the rice to absorb the liquid. If you heat the liquid up, everything is starting at the same pace. I'm gonna add a little salt here because I like to layer things with salt. This stock is essentially homemade, so there is no salt in this stock. So you want to think about that. If you're buying something over the counter, there's probably some added salt to it. So taste it and see if you need to adjust your salt level while cooking a dish. But when you make it at home, you're fully aware of what you're putting into it. The rice grits that we're using here, they're called Carolina Gold rice. I really like using this rice because it's a local ingredient that is a heritage grain that was really extinct a few years ago. And so it's really become revitalized in the region. Supporting that is important to us, and also it's just delicious. It's a little complicated because it's starchier. It's a really great idea to rinse the rice before you use it and rinse off some of the starch. Here we're not doing that because we want that starch to help to bind and thicken our end result. Now that we have our rice and celery, shallot, and onion all toasted and married together, we're going to start to layer the dish even further. I've salted all of my ingredients, and now I'm going to add a little tomato paste. I really love the combination of tomato and shrimp in particular, and tomato and seafood really pair well together. And so I think anchoring this dish with a little tomato is a great way to have the fish and shrimp and the stocks all kind of shine together. So we're gonna coat all our rice with our tomato paste. And we're also going to add a little saffron. And saffron and seafood go great together as well. Tomato, all those things really pair well. So I like to combine ingredients that go together really well and grow together really well in the same dish. All right, we're going to make sure everything's all incorporated. And then this is really a nod to a traditional risotto. We're going to deglaze here with a little bit of white wine. Once the alcohol of the wine cooks off, it's really going to highlight the aromatics of the saffron and also the tomato paste. So the way that you can tell if white wine is cooked off is it's really strong in the very beginning. It almost evaporates, and then the smell becomes a little sweeter. So it's really pungent and acidic in the beginning. Then it starts to sweeten up, and that pungency kind of goes away. That's when you can tell if alcohol is burned off. Okay, now we're ready to ladle in our shrimp stock. It's nice and warm. And it's great to start the liquid and the rice at the same temperature. It just incorporates a little faster and more evenly. I'm gonna get a couple ladles in here and get it really going. And then I will slow down and add one ladle at a time. Here I'm starting to smell the shrimp stock really pungently. There's some sweetness from the wine. Also, I'm smelling the saffron. So what we're doing here is we're letting the rice absorb the liquid gradually. As the rice absorbs the liquid, it starts to release its starch and everything starts to kind of come together. As you can see, the grains are really separated, so they're still pretty raw. As this dish continues to cook, the grains will plump up and the sauce will look a little creamier. One of the misconceptions about risotto is that you really have to stand over it, but you don't have to stand over it, but you should stand near it. You want a continuous stirring motion just to continue to really fully incorporate that liquid and prevent things from sticking on the bottom. So we're gonna do this for about 20 minutes, and in the meantime, we can prepare our seafood. So here we have Georgia white shrimp that have been peeled and deveined. We're gonna use about a pound. And here we have some red snapper. I like using Georgia white shrimp because it's super local. I can get it really fresh, and that's the best way to use seafood. Red snappers run pretty close to the Georgia coast. We often find them in North Carolina, so I really like using red snapper, and it's a nice, plump, flaky white fish with a really sweet taste, so I like using that fish as well. I would stay away from a very oily fish like salmon or trout for a dish like this. You want maybe flounder, black bass, those types of fish if you're going to use it in a dish like this, because it'll pair really well with the saffron and the shrimp stock, and it won't overpower anything. Okay, a lot of times when you receive snapper, the skin is already on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the skin off. So when you're taking the skin off of fish, you actually want it to make sure it's manageable for you. So what I'm going to do is cut it down the bloodline. I'm using my chef knife to do that. I also have a utility knife here, which is a little smaller and a little thinner. Use the knife that's most comfortable for you. A nice little trick is you want to create almost a little tab or a little handle to hold on to, because the act of taking the skin off really is just moving the skin and not moving the fish itself. So you need something to grab onto. So I'm just gonna make a little incision right here and not cut all the way down to the skin, not cut through the skin, just to the skin. And then I'm gonna anchor my knife almost at a 45-degree angle to the board, and I'm going to wiggle the skin as I hold my knife and pull it through. And the reason why I'm taking off the skin for this is because the skin for a red snapper is a little thick, I find, and I like to sear it to get it crispy, but to stew it down, I find it chewy. So I just want to remove the skin. So we're gonna dice this up. I'm gonna try to do bite-sized pieces here, or fork-sized pieces. So sometimes when you multitask, you have to kind of get back in there and do a little damage control. When you aren't stirring the rice, it has a tendency to stick to the bottom. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some liquid, and we're going to continue to incorporate and really try to release some of that rice that's in the bottom of the pan. These are happy mistakes. And as you can see, the rice is really starting to plump up. And you should think about reducing your heat here. And I'm going to taste it to see if it's ready for me to add my seafood. We're getting pretty close. It's still a little toothsome, so I'm not quite ready to serve it. But this would be a place that we would stop it at the restaurant so we can reheat it later and incorporate the fresher ingredients before we serve it to our table. But you can see that the liquid is really starting to be absorbed in the rice. The saffron's really starting to bloom. I think another important part about this dish is how specific it is, right? How you really needed to be close to the water in order to grow rice. And enslaved Black people really showed Americans how to do that. So there was an opportunity of learning and growing there. And incorporating this rice with seafood really connects the two, connects the water and also connects the land. The tomato smell is starting to marry with the shrimp smell. The rice is no longer smelling raw and toasted. It's starting to also incorporate some of the aromatics. It's really plump, starting to meld together. So if you notice, every grain of rice is really being coated by the stock. And that has something to do with the starch in the rice. The rice is actually absorbing the liquid. I'm gonna give it one more taste, but I think we're close. We're ready to add our seafood. We're ready. The rice is fully cooked through, but there's still some texture. So it gives us room to allow the seafood to cook without the rice being overcooked. But the great thing about rice grits is that you can afford to overcook them a little bit. We're putting in our seafood and folding it, and we're gonna cook this for about 6 minutes. And you'll be able to tell because the flesh of the fish will become firmer and start to turn white. The shrimp will start to turn pink. We'll continue to add some stock to this. The best way to find rice Midlands, if you can't find it in your local store, is to buy it online from Anson Mills. They sell grits, rice grits, locally milled grits, and locally milled rice. So as we can see, our shrimp is pink. Our fish is really starting to take some shape here. And I'm gonna turn this off and let it to continue to cook. I'm gonna add some butter here. And the reason why I'm adding butter is because we have a decent amount of acid in this dish. And the fat from the butter really is going to balance the acid. So I have about 2 tablespoons of butter. You can add more if you like, but I think this is about all we need. And I'm just gonna fold this butter in until it's melted. And just because I wanna get a little fancy, we're gonna add some parsley to brighten it up and add a little color, and also add a little freshness to the dish. I like chopped parsley in this dish. I also like tarragon or chervil. With the seafood, fresh herbs pair really well. Okay, I think we're ready to plate. I'm gonna garnish this with a little extra parsley on top. And here we are, Carolina Gold Rice Midlands with shrimp and red snapper. We're gonna make fish and grits. Not exactly like my grandmother Geneva's, but definitely inspired by her. Every Friday night, she would prepare the fish that my grandfather would catch the morning of. She always served it with white grits and baked beans, and she always served it fried. And we would have like a little bit of mustard on the plate. And that was just one of the best dishes ever, one of my favorite memories of her. And this dish is really an homage to her. It's a little bit different, it's a little bit more complicated, but I think she would like it. So I want to share it with you. At the restaurant, we don't cook grits with just water, we cook grits with water and cream. And that's just to add a little bit of a creamy texture to it, a creamy note to it, and instead of adding butter. Growing up, we always ate grits with just water, a little bit of salt in that water, and butter. So we're getting a little fancy here, but that's okay. So we have some water that's hot. I'm just gonna pour this cream in so we can get everything warm before I stir in my grits. You should put grits into boiling water. You don't start grits with cold water. So we'll get that nice and hot. And also in the meantime, I'm gonna heat up my butter for my roux. So right here we have the same grits in 2 different stages. So these are stone ground white grits. They're dry and they're pretty popular. They're pretty easy to find. These are not quick grits that have been sort of cooked already. These are just the maize, the hominy, which is ground, and this is the result of that. We like to soak our grits overnight because grits absorb a lot of water. So if you soak them overnight, you really kind of cut down your process a little bit. And you can see that this is the same amount of grits and they've almost expanded by double. White grits have a milder corn flavor and they have a higher sugar content. We're gonna use white grits here because I think it pairs well with the fish. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna rain in our grits. Give them a good stir. Let them come up to a boil. Give it another stir, and then I'll cover them with a lid. In the pan in front of me, I have melted butter, and I'm going to put in equal parts flour. This is going to be the base of our sauce. Roux is usually used to thicken classic sauces with flour and butter, like a bechamel or a brown sauce. Here we're going to use it as the base of our gravy. So we call this sauce at the restaurant Creole sauce. But I don't know if that's really a correct name for it because it's really born out of the idea of a shrimp etouffee. And a shrimp etouffee is a signature dish out of Louisiana. So our grits are boiling. We're gonna turn these down and cover them. Really sort of cooking the initial starch out of our flour here. And we're toasting it up. So I smell toasted butter a little bit, smell flour. Really does smell quite delicious. And as you cook the flour, it gets nuttier and more flavorful. We want a little color here to enrichen the sauce. So you can see it's really turning from a really blonde color to almost like a vanilla, moving into maybe like a butterscotch. So roux varies from colors from really white and really blonde all the way to sort of like a milk chocolate. Usually when you're doing a gumbo, you really want a dark roux. When you're doing a bechamel, which is a sauce that's based with roux and milk or roux and cream, you want it to be very light in color. You want it to resemble the color of milk. So we're gonna take it to really just this kind of almond color. And we're gonna start to layer in our trinity. These are probably the three most famous ingredients in Creole cooking: onion, celery, and bell pepper. A lot of Cajun and Creole cooking have these vegetables at the base: gumbo, etouffee, jambalaya. We're gonna just add a little bit of a variation to this with a little bit of fresh garlic. We'll give this an opportunity to cook down. So right now our grits are starting to thicken up. It's nice because there's a lot of liquid still in there and it's cooking at a good rate. It's thick, but it's moving. Sometimes when there's not enough liquid in grits, you kind of put your spoon in there and it doesn't want to go anywhere. And if that happens, you can add more water and thin them out. Grits are very forgiving. So with here, this is a very sort of nice consistency we have, and it's allowing room for the grits to expand and absorb the cream, absorb the water and the salt. Okay, gonna continue to coat our trinity with our roux and let that cook down. I'm gonna add a little salt here. Help break everything down. Starting to smell the garlic. That nutty roux is really starting to come through. Really smell the onions here and the celery. And we're cooking. Isn't this fun? We really want these vegetables to break down. You want to extract all that flavor initially before we start to build with our spices. And you want to let the roux do its work. You want the roux to coat everything, so when we start to put in our stocks, it won't lump up on us. It'll be a nice velvety sauce. Let's check our grits. So our grits are starting to thicken up a little bit, which is good. So this is where you want to be careful because grits like to pop up. So you really want to be careful about this. So get that flame to where it's manageable for you. And this is really close to the consistency that we're looking for. Soaking the grits really reduces the cooking time. I've been eating grits my whole life, and I really just started getting good at cooking them. Really started understanding the consistency that I wanted, understanding which ingredients I want to go into them, really utilizing cream instead of butter with the grits. And I really think it's a well-developed recipe. Very young, I became painfully aware that my level of salt was not always appreciated. And grits was the first indicator of that. So tasting your food and tasting your liquid before you put the grits in is probably one of the best tips that I can give you, because it will save you from ruining a pot of grits like I've done once or twice in my life. So this is about where we want to be. The vegetables are broken down a little bit more. And in order to really continue to help them, we should start to add some liquid. So before we add liquid, we'll add some spices. This is a blackening spice. You can find a version of this in your local supermarket. This is white pepper. A little cayenne. Black pepper. And our secret ingredient, a little shrimp powder. Our shrimp powder really just adds a deeper layer of shrimp to this dish. This is a variation of an etouffee. And etouffee is usually a crawfish dish, but we like to do it with shrimp in Savannah because shrimp is very local to us. And essentially, the shrimp powder is dehydrated shrimp and or dehydrated shrimp shells. So when you use shrimp, you can save the shells, you can put them in an off oven overnight, they can dry up, and you can blend them into a powder and store them in your cabinet. And you can use them to enrich a sauce. So we're gonna deglaze here with a little wine. Once that wine cooks out a little bit, it goes from really acidic to sweet, we're going to start to put in our stock. I'm gonna switch from a spoon to a whisk. I'm gonna pour a little here, just to get it going. So remember, this is a gravy. So it's supposed to be thick, it's supposed to coat. You don't want it too thick where you can't move your whisk through it, but you do want it thick enough that it's going to stick to the grits and stick to a nice piece of fish. So once your stock is fully incorporated, we'll turn the flame down low and let this cook for about 20 minutes. So, that's delicious, by the way. So, some things have changed. Our sauce is cooked down, and we have some oil in a cast iron pan here so we can fry our fish. And we also just moved our grits over and let them finish cooking in the back. The first thing I'm gonna do is really blend up this sauce a little bit. This is how we would do it at the restaurant. I'm using an immersion blender, but at home, you can leave it just the way it is. I'm tilting the pan because it's a little shallow, so I just want to make sure that I'm going to get all these good bits without splattering gravy all over myself. Okay, I'm gonna fold in this crab meat and let this continue to just stay on a low heat. I love using crab meat with grits. I love using crab meat with this particular sauce. I think the Trinity goes really well with seafood, so adding crab meat to this just really gives it an extra layer, an extra boost, more texture, and really turns it into something super special. So I guarantee if you invite your friends over for fish and grits and you have some crab in your gravy, they'll be talking about that for a little while. So this is really all set. We're just gonna now focus on our fish. We'll let this to continue to stay warm, so when we plate it later, you can see it all come together, but we're really close. So now we're gonna bread some fish. There's a lot of different ways that you can bread things. I'm going to use sort of a standard breading procedure, which has 3 steps. So we're starting with corn flour. We're going to have buttermilk in the middle. The final coat will be cornmeal for our fish. It just gives it 3 additional layers and it makes it extra crispy. So we're going to use this procedure. I added a little bit of salt to the corn flour, a little bit of salt to the cornmeal. I want to add a little cayenne pepper to the buttermilk. You can add cayenne, you can add garlic powder if you want, black pepper, your favorite seasoning on fish. This is where you should add it. It sort of protects the spices from being burned. So if I added it in the final step, there's a higher chance that I will burn the spices, but adding it in this step, there's a protective layer that's coming after it. I'm gonna add a little salt here. Gonna whisk this all together. And I'm also gonna put a little salt on my fish, just for good measure. The fish we're using today is trout. This is a freshwater trout. This is something that my grandfather often caught. So this is one of my favorite fish to eat fish and grits with because it's just so nostalgic. But you can use your favorite fish. If you don't care for trout, you can use red snapper, you can use black bass, you can use porgies, you can use whiting. Those 2 are my favorite as well. So do a nice little dredge in the first flour and give it a little shake. In the second, drip off a little bit of that excess liquid and we'll put it in our cornmeal. So while I'm preparing this, I'm preheating my oil. It takes a little while for the oil to get hot, and it's really great to preheat it while you're sort of preparing your steps. I want it to heat up to about 325 degrees. If it's too cool, you tend to get a soggier crust and the oil penetrates. If the oil is too hot, you tend to burn the coating and your product, your chicken or your fish isn't fully cooked through. So I'm going to turn all these over. And my oil is sort of waving at me a little bit. So this is a little trick my mother used to do. She used to throw a little bit of the breading into the oil and see how it reacts. When it starts to bubble like that, we're pretty close. Cast iron pans were often used in my house because they are so versatile. You can cook with them outside, you can cook with them inside. They hold heat really well, and they're really good for things like frying. I inherited my grandmother's cast iron pan, and it's one of the more special pieces that I have in my kitchen. So you should keep in mind that this oil is hot, and it can splatter back on you. So laying it away from you is the safest way, because if the oil splatters, it will splatter away from you. It won't splatter towards you. The oil I'm using today is peanut oil. It has a high smoke point. It doesn't burn and the flavor doesn't alter. So I like frying with it. I would not fry with an oil like olive oil. I wouldn't fry with an animal fat because they tend to have lower smoking points, but peanut oil is really good. Canola oil is really good. So this is a good temperature with 1 piece of fish in it. But if I were to add all 4 pieces of fish, it just will cool the oil down a little faster than I want. So I'm just waiting a little bit for the oil to catch up a little bit. And mind you, I'm gonna take these out at different times because they're going in at different times. That's what you want. That right there. Right now I'm smelling cornmeal, fresh trout cooking. I'm also smelling the etouffee and the crab meat and the gravy that we have. This fish is going to take about 6 minutes to cook. So while we're waiting for our fish to brown, I'm going to whisk in some butter into our grits. I like adding butter to grits because it gives a nice sheen to it at the finish. And I really just love the taste of butter and grits. So even though there's cream in it, I think that the butter just really changes the mouthfeel and reminds me of how I used to eat grits when I was younger. Okay, breakfast is almost ready. Our grits are ready, our gravy is ready, our fish is close. Don't be afraid to check your food. Look and see if it's browning the way you want it to. It's nicer when you leave it alone, but if you're not too sure if it's ready yet, just give it a little peek and let it continue to cook on. A good way to tell if something is done is by color. This is a nice golden brown. So we'll take out our first piece of fish and let it drain. And add a little salt on the top. Helps to keep it crispy. It also adds another layer of flavor. Oh yeah. Okay, so got nice color on our skin side. I flipped it over. I'm going to finish it on the flesh side. I'm using a rack in this case to put the fried fish on because I want it to cool off and stay crispy. If I were to put a piece of fish on a towel or in a bowl, as the heat escapes, it will sort of soften the crust. And putting it on a rack, elevating it like this, allows the air to flow through and allows the crust to remain crispy. But if you don't have a rack at home, don't worry about it. It's just something that we do at the restaurant, and it's just a nice trick that I've learned over time. So right now, I'm just looking to see that there's going to be even color on both sides. It will ensure me that the fish is cooked through, and also that the batter on the outside is cooked through. And that also helps with the crispiness. I'm using a spatula here and it's widely slotted to allow the grease to flow through. It's just easier to help pick up the fish. It is called a fish spatula. So it's doing what it needs to do. It's a great tool to have. It's really good when you're pan searing and sauteing proteins. It's just a lightweight, thin spatula that has a little bit of flexibility, so it's easy to get under proteins if you're trying to flip them or rearrange them in the pan. I'm adding a little salt to our fish. Let it cool down, and we are ready to plate. Let's taste our grits. It's thick, but there's movement in the pan. They're coating our spoon nicely. They smell great. Nice and creamy. I smell corn. I smell a little bit of sweetness from the butter. There's still some texture there, which is what you want, but it's really smooth, really creamy. I'll taste my etouffee, my Creole sauce. Delicious. That crab really pops. It's really good. We'll start with the bed of grits. I'll plate this up, mainly how I would do it at home. We'll go in with our sauce around the grits. And we'll put our fish on top. Maybe 2 pieces of fish. I got a busy day today. This is fish and grits with Creole sauce. A very popular Southern dish is beef liver and grits. So during a special event at the Gray, I really was thinking about that dish and really longing for it and trying to figure out how to incorporate it in our menu. And because I spent some time in France and it was really a formative time in my career, I got to experience a fatty duck liver, which is called foie gras. And it's really one of my favorite ingredients. I thought incorporating it over grits would make sense. And we did this dish at the Gray, and it's just been a hit ever since. This dish is a really good example of my evolution. It takes a childhood memory, infuses it with some life experiences, and it gives you an end result that is very unique and in your own voice. For me, this dish, foie and grits with onion gravy, represents that. This is our lobe of foie. It's usually about a pound, maybe a pound and a half. It has a very fatty texture, and so as it heats up, you start to render some of the fat. So you want to keep it as cold as possible. Because it's so cold, it doesn't really slice as evenly as you would want it to. So a very easy trick to do is to have your knife in a hot water bane or have a blowtorch in order to heat up whatever tool you're going to use to slice through it. It really gives you a clean slice, and I'll demonstrate that now. This foie lobe is irregularly shaped. And really what needs to be cleaned is what's inside of it. There are some veins that run through and across the sections. And sometimes while you're slicing it, you may expose one. And that's ultimately what you need to clean out of this foie, because that vein is really not pleasant to eat. And it's a little chewy and the texture is very different. So you just want to remove that. And that's really the extent of cleaning it. We like to portion it and make sure it's even sized and things like that for presentation. So we end up with scraps that we turn into a mousse and we may put into another dish, but you can eat the foie as is, but normally you really want to remove the veins that are within the lobe. So I have my knife in warm water, just gonna dry it. And whenever I'm portioning something, I like to break it down to a manageable size. So the first thing I'm gonna do is cut this lobe right down the center. If your knife gets stuck, you can stick it right back in the water to heat it up again. Wipe it clean and start where you left off. There are different layers in the foie lobe, and this we will clean up as we portion it, but I really just wanted to slice it in half. If my knife was warmer toward the bottom, I would have gotten a cleaner slice like up at the top. You don't have to worry about it. This is a very forgiving piece of protein. You can smooth that out if you want. Remove these parts and save them and put them into a filling for a ravioli or mix it with butter. You can put it on a steak or something. You can really get creative with it. We'll go right down the center again, looking for a vein. So where this hole is possibly where a vein is running through the lobe. So we can slice our portion and see if there's anything to pull away. Usually we serve about a 2-ounce portion of foie over grits. So this is probably about right. Want to make sure there's nothing in there wanting to come out. We seem good to go. And one thing I like to do is score the foie. And this just helps to concentrate the caramelization, and it looks good. I'm gonna sear this, and we'll just get it hot. Just want to see how hot it is. This is a good way to see how hot something is. Oh yeah. See how that beads around? Really hot, really ready to go. And that's what we want. So this is gonna smoke, but that's okay. See how the pan is smoking? We'll let it cool down just a bit. I don't want to burn it. But we want our pan really, really hot because this is very quick. The hotter we sear the foie, the less we'll lose. The fat will not have time enough to really heat up and exude out. So the quicker the sear, the more we'll retain. Our favorite, a little salt. Okay. Going in. Gonna give it a little press. It's caramelizing around. You can see it sort of caramelizing up the side. You really smell the liver as it caramelizes. And it smells delicious. I love the smell of liver. So this is enough. We'll give it a little peek and make sure it looks the way we want it to. It's looking pretty good, but I want it to get a little bit more color. And I like to press it down in the pan so it just adheres to it. It's just sort of stuck. And then the caramelizing of the foie will help to release it from the pan. So I like to give it just a little push so everything sears off nicely. As you see, it's kind of running out, which is great. Give it a little flip, and we're gonna rest our foie right here until we're ready to plate. So what I would like to do with what's in the pan is I'm gonna cool it down a little bit first. I wanna make a gravy with what's left in the pan. So we will remove some of this fat. So this is gonna go really, really fast. We'll add our butter. We'll add our onions. I'm taking advantage of the drippings of what was left after the foie. So we really just call this a pan sauce. You're taking all the things that happen in the pan and you're milling them together and you're keeping all the flavor. So a little flour in the pan gravy helps to reduce reduction time and thicken our sauce. So we'll let our onions cook out a little bit. The onions are nice and bright. The butter is nice and toasty. And I'm going to add some chicken stock here. And we're going to reduce that down. Growing up eating beef liver, my mom always made a pan sauce after she would sear the beef liver. And I remember her always dusting it with flour. So that's what prompted me to add a little flour here to ensure that the gravy or the sauce would just have a little more body to it. Usually pan sauces are really just the remnants of what is left in the pan, and you add a little water to it or you add a little stock and you sort of cook that down. We usually use butter as an emulsifier to thicken it. Adding a roux to it, adding flour to it, really helps just thicken up that sauce. And we're starting to see it's thickening up. And this white residue is a reflection of the flour that we added. It's the proteins sort of coagulating. That chicken smell is starting to come through. Remnants of what the foie left behind in the pan, you can faintly smell. I'm gonna add a little bit of hot pepper, a little cayenne to this. The ironness of the liver really goes well with the sweetness of the corn, and the creaminess really helps to meld the textures together. So you have a nice fatty piece of foie, you have some creamy grits with texture, and the onion gravy just makes it all make sense. So this is a very, very classic American pairing, and I think adding foie just simply elevates it. It makes it interesting, and it sparks your curiosity. So we're gonna let this reduce. It's probably gonna take maybe another 30 minutes. Wanna get it really tight. And then we're gonna plate. Let's get some grits. Grits. Foie is a very unusual protein. You don't find it in many places. In fact, there's only 1 or 2 farms in the country that still produce it. So if this is an ingredient that is difficult for you to find, or you're just not really interested in trying, you should use a beef liver. Also, chicken livers would be a great idea for a dish like this. I just think the iron taste of liver and the sweetness of the onions and the creaminess of the grits really complement each other. And it really tells a story about where this dish originated from, and you start to understand why people find it so delicious. You can add a little currant jelly to this, and for a little extra sweetness, or a little raspberry jelly, or grape, or something like that to really kind of give it a little bit of pop. But I like it just plain like this with a little bit of gravy poured over the top. So don't forget, if this is not your thing, don't worry. I will share my favorite beef liver and grits recipe in the class guide. Foie and grits with onion gravy. The reason why I'm doing this quail dish with cornbread dressing today is because it's a way that connects my ancestral cooking along with Black cooking in America, and it uses modern techniques that just elevate the whole dish. We always have cornbread dressing around the holidays, and we always have it with turkey, but you don't want to have turkey all year round. It's nice to have a little alternative to such a big bird, a seasonal bird, so you can have this cornbread dressing with the quail throughout the year. First thing I'm going to tell you is that we're making a cornbread dressing. This is a family recipe that I would love to share with you. It is one that every year I get better at doing, but it's something that my grandmother made for us, and very few family members, my uncle and my mom, really do a good job. I'm still learning, so this is a great opportunity to just let you know that we're always still learning, and this is the great part about life and great part about taking masterclass, is because it's about elevating and learning and growing. So there's a few steps that you have to do beforehand in order to get to where we are right now. The first thing you need to do is bake off your favorite cornbread recipe. Bake it off, let it cool. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna have some onions, some carrots, and some celery, and you're gonna saute it down. This combination is called mirepoix. It's okay if it gets a little color. You want that. You want a little bit of caramelization. Once it gets to this phase, there's a little bit of color going on, then you want to have some chicken stock on hand, and you want to deglaze your pan with the chicken stock. This is a chicken stock that we've reduced down, so it gives us a really deep, rich, chickeny flavor. Gonna stir that in. Then the next thing you want to do is add some cream. So right now we're just incorporating the cream with the caramelized vegetables and making sure it all gets mixed up in together. We're keeping it at a very, very low heat. And this is gonna act as the base flavor of this dish. We're gonna add some fresh herbs, some thyme. You can also add dried thyme to this if you'd like, but we'll add 4 sprigs of thyme, that good old bay leaf that keeps us where we need to be. Stir and keep an eye on the heat. We don't want this to overflow. That cream is gonna wanna come up on you, so you wanna keep the heat low, and as soon as you start to see it bubble up a little bit, you just wanna give it a stir to cool it off. So now we're gonna move over to the cornbread part. We have our cornbread that's been cooked off, cooled. It's also been refrigerated, and we want to crumble it up. I like to do this with my hands. Sometimes you can cube it if you want and dry it overnight, but this is how my grandmother did it, so this is what I'm gonna do until I can get it right. So we'll crumble this cornbread up. And again, you can make this cornbread from scratch. You use your favorite recipe that you want. All right, this looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna crack some eggs. So I guess the best way to describe this dish is sort of like a savory bread pudding. It can also be described a little bit like a spoon bread. Spoon breads traditionally have egg whites that are whipped and folded into a base batter. We're using the whole egg here, so it's going to be denser, not as light. But we do want that consistency. A good scramble on the eggs, and you can set this to the side. We'll bring back our cornbread, and I want to continue to season this. So we're going to add some grated onion. This is a holiday dish, and usually around the holidays we use sage. So we're going to add some fresh sage, cayenne pepper, black pepper, and we'll incorporate. Now that my cream and chicken stock has come up to a boil, I want to add it into my cornbread mixture. I'm going to remove the bay leaf. Remove the thyme. There's still some more thyme in there, but it will show itself, so don't worry. And I'm going to pour this hot mixture over the cornbread. Your cornbread is gonna soak up this liquid, and that is exactly what it should do. So every bite is going to taste just like the chicken stock and the mirepoix. You have that fresh grated onion in there to add a nice little bite to it. So you want this mixture to be nice and wet. We're gonna add the eggs a little bit at a time to sort of temper the eggs into the mixture so we don't scramble them. Eggs are extremely resilient. They will take a lot, but they're very sensitive to heat, so you just wanna slowly incorporate them. Oh man, I need my mom here to tell me how I'm doing. This is looking pretty good. All right, so we're gonna add our last bit of egg here. So it should be really wet. And those eggs are gonna really come in handy because what's gonna happen is gonna allow this mixture to set up. I put in 5 eggs. I wanna make sure that I add a little salt to those eggs. So I'm gonna add just a little salt here at the end. Then I'm gonna set it up and put it in the oven. I'm gonna use a square 8x8 dish, and I really wanna fill it all the way to the top. I'm gonna butter the pan so when we take out our dressing, it won't stick to the bottom. You can go old school like this and use a stick of butter and rub it along all the sides. If you have a pan spray at home, that works as well. But since we're cooking Grandma's recipe, we might as well go old school. You don't have to be shy. There's really not a lot of fat in this recipe. There's some cream and some eggs, but there's not a lot of fat. So this should work out just fine. Okay, my batter's ready. I'm gonna pour in. Leaving a little space at the top, giving us room to grow and souffle up. Okay, we're ready to go in the oven. Now we're gonna make some watermelon molasses. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, but I find it really interesting. It was introduced to me by a watermelon farmer named Nat Bradford, who was 4 generations farmer. People really flocked to them in the early 19th century. These watermelons were really praised because the flesh was really red and really sweet. And I really love incorporating it in different dishes like a barbecue sauce. When I think of barbecue sauce, I think of cane syrup, I think of the sweetener in the sauce, brown sugar, molasses. So we can replace that sweetener with this watermelon molasses. So it really is a unique thing, and I was introduced to it, and I just loved it, and I try to recreate it every chance I get. It's really great with gamey meat that pairs well with sweetness. And we're gonna use this watermelon molasses on our quail. You know, I don't really know the best way to pick a ripe watermelon other than tasting it. My uncle used to take the straw out of a broom and balance it on a watermelon. I think he did that when I was 10 just to make me think that he was really, really smart. And I believed him for a long time. My mom will take a watermelon and she will sort of bring it close to her ear or kneel down to it and knock on it. And if it sounds full, it's sweet, which kind of makes sense. If it sounds full, it's probably full of juice and sugar. But if it sounds hollow, she wouldn't pick it. So those are my 2 tricks. And one of them, I think, is a little bit of a myth. So I just buy them, cut into them, and hope for the best. All right, let's juice some watermelon. It's nice to have a towel handy because you just don't know what's gonna happen. Watermelons have a mind of their own. All right, so we're gonna pull this up. I'm gonna pour this in the pan and we're gonna let it reduce. So there's a few things that's gonna happen. It's gonna come up to a boil, then it's gonna separate. And you're gonna see the sugar, which is gonna be redder, and the water, which is gonna be clearer. Once those two things reincorporate, that's when you need to start paying attention, because now you're cooking the water out, so you're left with just the sugar of the watermelon. So you wanna be careful not to scorch it. Stirring will help. A controlled heat will help. If you burn it, it's probably not the end of the world if you like that taste, but it's all about timing, and you wanna pull it off the stove right when it's perfect, right when it's right reduced and looks like molasses. So just be easy with it, take your time, and don't rush it. But it's gonna talk to you. It's gonna tell you when it's getting close. So it's obviously gonna be a lot less liquid. So we have about a quart of watermelon juice here. We're probably gonna end up with a half a cup of molasses. We've reduced our watermelon. Our water has evaporated and left us with the sugar. And I think that this is where you want it to be. It's a little loose, but for you at home, I think this is a great place to start, because as it reduces and the sugar concentrates, you have a higher chance of burning it, and I don't want that to be your experience. So we're gonna pull this from the heat, and we'll use this watermelon reduction as a glaze for our quail. Let me give it a little taste so I can describe it a little bit better. And I think that you can probably use different juices or different fruit for a preparation like this. You know, you can use orange juice, you can use pineapple juice, maybe even apple juice. Think about using apple juice, reducing it down, putting it on a piece of pork. Pineapple juice is great for summertime if you're grilling outside for steaks. The watermelon flavor is still there. Sugar concentration is really high, but not obnoxiously high. And it almost tastes like the best watermelon candy that you could ever eat. So we're gonna pull it here and we'll let it cool. Now we're gonna move over to seasoning the quail. We're going to pan sear the quail in a cast iron pan. If you have like a grill pan at home, that's great. If you have a grill at home, that's awesome. If you're experienced cooking quail, you understand that it's a little bird and they cook really fast, so you don't need a lot of time to cook them. It's good to marinate them. You can season them overnight and leave them in the fridge, season them overnight, pull them out right before you're ready to cook them, and everything else is done. Cook the quail and you're ready to go. So we're going to add just a little bit of blended oil onto our quail. This is really just gonna help our seasonings adhere to the bird. If you don't have blended oil, you can use any high temperature oil, peanut, sunflower, canola oil. I would not use olive oil on this because olive oil has the lowest smoking point of all those oils, and you really want to get this to 325. So I would just be careful about using an oil like olive oil. This blackening spice has a little bit of salt in it, paprika, cayenne, some dried herbs that consist of thyme. There's bay leaf in here. There's onion powder and garlic powder. And this is gonna help add some nice color to our quail. The reason why I'm using quail is because it's really prevalent in the South. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it likes to live there, number one, and people are able to hunt it. And if you're really skilled at shooting, you can probably shoot one of these birds, pluck it, and have a decent meal for dinner. And it's pretty much free of charge. And so I think that African Americans really took to hunting and using game in their food. So guinea fowl, quail, fishing, oystering, shrimping, all these foods you can go out on your own and you can harvest them or shoot them and you can create dinner from them. Now, you probably need a whole lot of quail to feed a big family, but maybe that's what you needed to do in order to have some sort of protein on the table. So I really wasn't really introduced to quail in this way until moving to the South and seeing what an impact it has on the culture and how familiar everyone is to eating this bird. In New York, it was really special, and in the South, it just seems like something that people just grew up eating. So quail has a bit of a darker look to it. The flesh isn't as light as chicken or rabbit. It's almost the same color as duck. And it is gamey without being overpowering. The meat is really succulent. So the thighs and the legs are super tender when they're grilled to being done. Even the breast of the quail eats really nicely. So it's just a tender bird, mild in gaminess and delicate in flavor, but it looks richer than what it is. It looks more gamey like a duck, but it's really mild. If you can't find quail, or if you've never heard of quail, or you just refuse to eat a bird like quail, you can try this recipe on chicken. You can also try it on pork. So don't be afraid to experiment. You can totally use this watermelon molasses on any kind of protein that you want. Just give it a try. You can probably use it on beef if you want, maybe a nice skirt steak if you're grilling, a chicken breast if you want, or a pork chop. I think all three of those proteins will really go well with this dish. But I'm just focusing on quail because I think it really highlights this special bird. And after we marinate it, we'll sear it and cook it and plate up our dish. All right, I'm just gonna throw this in the fridge. Let's check our cornbread dressing. Okay. All right. It's pretty set. So I'm shaking it to make sure it's not too jiggly. It's nice and souffled up. It still feels pretty moist. Okay, come on, Grandma. Here we go. All right, so I'm just gonna let this cool, let it set. It's gonna deflate just a little bit. That's what soufflés do. They sort of raise up and then they come down a little bit and settle in. So we'll let that happen while it's cooling off. We can sear our quail and get ready to eat. I'm gonna turn on my cast iron pan. So I want it a mid-low. And a little oil to the pan. So right now, I wanna see really how fast the oil moves around the pan. And that lets me know where I'm at as far as temperature. When the pan's really hot, the oil pretty much shoots across the pan and it starts to smoke almost immediately. And right now we're sort of at a warm temperature, but not hot enough to sear. The oil is still kind of cold in the pan. So right before the oil starts to smoke, it will get a little wavy in the pan, and that's when I want to put in my quail. One thing to remember about searing at high heat is as soon as you put in whatever you're cooking, whatever the protein is, whatever the vegetable is, you are going to cool down the pan. So you want it to be almost at a smoke level so it will retain as much heat as possible, and that's where you'll get caramelization. Caramelization is really the browning process. It caramelizes the sugars in whatever it is that you're cooking. So caramelization will caramelize the blackening spice on top of the quail, so we'll get some nice color on that. So it browns and it gives you like good flavor and also good texture, and it looks really good. So the oil's separating out a little bit, almost looking like a spider web. And we really want to think about searing. So this quail has been sitting out for maybe about 10 minutes. It's nice to bring a protein out and let it not quite come up to room temperature, but let it sit out for a few minutes, not straight from the refrigerator, because if you let the temperature kind of raise up to 50 degrees, meaning letting it sit on the counter for about 10-15 minutes, you have a prettier piece of protein on the inside and the out. Okay, so I think my pan is hot. And this is a good opportunity for you to go into the pan, and if it's not ready, you can pull it out. I think I want it a little bit hotter. So now I have this spider web that I was talking about. The oil is almost at a smoking point, and it's sort of waving a little bit, and it's kind of like creating these lines running to the side of the pan. It's a little bit of smoke. I'm gonna go ahead and go in. Aren't they adorable? Okay, so we're gonna sear on one side, then we'll flip, get some color, we'll flip them over, and finish them in the oven for about 8 minutes at 350 degrees. If you want them more well done, by all means, cook them a little longer. We like to serve them medium rare. What I'm smelling now is toasted seasoning, toasted spices. I'm looking for the smoke. I don't want too much smoke. If I'm getting smoked out by this quail, then my everything is too hot. It's a blackening spice, so it's gonna get a little darker than, say, a lemon pepper spice or just garlic or just onion powder. So I'm looking for some color, but I'm also looking for a consistent heat. I'm listening to the quail, and it's sort of percolating and searing at a speed that's not too fast and not too slow. I want to stay in the middle lane here. So we'll flip them over. So what the color is representing is the searing of the skin of the quail. It's also representing the spices that are on top of the quail. So that blackening spice is really starting to caramelize. That garlic and that onion really starting to caramelize here. We're gonna finish these in the oven. Oh yeah. So we're gonna take some of this watermelon glaze. We're gonna just brush it onto our quail as they rest. This is a good opportunity to put them back in the oven if you want, or put them on the grill really quickly. But I'm just going to brush them, let them rest a little bit so that glaze is still nice and tacky when I pick one up and eat it. Get the little legs in there. Nobody misses out. Okay, we have all of our elements ready, and it's time to plate. Spoon out a nice piece. This is what you want. You want it to be nice and joined together, but also still really moist. I think that's enough. Gonna grab our quail, plate it on the side. And here we have our gravy. It's a little Creole gravy. We'll have this recipe in the class guide. The Trinity is the base of the Creole gravy, and along with the blackening spice, I think that it goes really well together. So I wanted to just make sure that this dish had a nice little kick to it. I hope that you give it a try, and I hope that you enjoy it. This is a roasted quail with a watermelon glaze, a Creole sauce, and cornbread dressing. What I find working in the South is that usually the harvests come fast and quick as the temperature changes throughout the year. So seasons are short, and you have to take advantage of that. You only have one time a year to grow strawberries because the weather gets hotter and you can't replant them. So you only have certain months where people feel comfortable eating oysters in the South because the waters get really warm. And taking advantage of that time, they usually preserve. And so this dish is a real example of my first take on how Savannah and that region has affected my cooking. So I really want to talk about these oysters. These are Macintosh oysters. They are very specific to the region. They have been raised by a third-generation Black oyster farmer. And so it's just really special to hear about how the water has supported their family and how they create these different recipes surrounding oysters in this region. And for me to learn about the food of the region through the eyes of people who've been working the land for generations. So it's really important for me to amplify those types of voices in the cooking at the Gray Restaurant. I feel like you guys are like a rare breed, you know? Not a lot of you left, so I want to make sure you're around as long as we're around. It's a really important part of the story for us at the Gray because it keeps the oral history of that region alive. We really learn a lot about how people cook there, how people grew food there, and how they earned a living in that region, which gives us an opportunity to amplify those voices through our food. So using local ingredients is really important because it really helps to sustain a community. And that's a lot of the reason why we use the Macintosh oysters at the Gray Restaurant. Now I'm gonna show you how to shuck an oyster. It's kind of funny because I didn't realize that there were oysters on the coast, but I guess it makes sense. It's marshy, it's shallow water, and oysters tend to thrive there. They are salty, they have a little funkiness to them in a good way, and they're very salinic. So they're perfect oysters for cooking because they plump up really nicely and they really hold the flavor. So I particularly like cooking with these oysters, and I think traditionally people in the region usually cook with these types of oysters. For you at home, if you're located in the Northeast, you know, Blue Point oysters are great. I really like East Coast oysters to cook with. I like oysters with a thicker shell to cook with, and I like oysters with a thinner shell to eat raw. So West Coast oysters I tend to like to eat raw because their flavors are a little bit more delicate. You have more vegetal notes on them, or fruit notes. You have cucumber or melon or seaweed, and they're really prevalent. But for East Coast oysters, they usually vary in salinity, which makes for a better oyster to cook with, because you can build on that type of flavor. It's harder to build on the flavor of melon when you're trying to make a gumbo, right? So I'll just show you the oyster. This is sort of the cup of the oyster and the lid. And so what we do, there's a little sort of ledge here, a little shelf. We apply pressure here to lift the lid away from the oyster shell itself, away from the cup, and separate them in half. There's a muscle that connects the lid, the top lid, and the bottom part of the oyster, and that allows the oyster to open and close during its filtration process while it's in the water. Oysters are nature's natural filters, so they have to open and close in order to do that. And we want to disconnect that membrane in order to get the oyster out. So here I'll put in my shucker and hold the oyster down. The towel is really to protect me in case my hand slips. You don't want to, shuck your hand, you just want to shuck the oyster. So you want to apply some pressure, and once you get in there, you want to sort of lift all the way up. Sometimes it goes in, that's okay. I like to wipe my oyster knife off because sometimes there's a bit of shell. We'll wiggle our way in here, disconnect that top membrane. And that's ultimately what you will see when you shuck an oyster. There's some liquid in here, which is great. And the next part is we'll disconnect the membrane from the bottom of the shell. Let's try one more. I'm lucky enough to have my pick of good oysters here, so that's good. So we'll wiggle in here. This one's a little different because the shell it curves around, so the lid is a little hidden, so we have to manipulate it a little bit more. So we'll wiggle in, find a good leverage point, and then just lift up, and it sort of snaps a little bit like a bottle top. Once you hear that snap, you're free to go in, wiggle through, and disconnect. We'll disconnect the bottom. But I'm gonna open up one more, and we're gonna talk about how you can tell a really nice oyster from a really not so nice oyster. Okay, the first thing you wanna do when you open up an oyster is you wanna smell it. If it smells off at all, if it smells fishy or just funky, sour even, then that oyster is not a good oyster for you to eat. But if it smells clean, salinic, a little salty, West Coast oysters, sometimes they smell like cucumber. Sometimes they smell like seaweed. Those are the smells, those are the tasting notes or the smelling notes that you want to look for in looking for an oyster. Without those notes, then you kind of are on the borderline of having something that's not as fresh as you would want it to be. You also want the liquid to be clear. That's a good sign of a clean oyster and a healthy oyster. And you want the texture to be firm. So give it a little poke and make sure it bounces back. If your finger imprint is stuck in the oyster and you can kind of see how your finger is still curved in it, then that is probably an older oyster and you should not eat that oyster. I really like pickling because it's a way of preservation. It's one of the oldest preserving techniques. Pickling doesn't have to just be vegetables. Seafood works well with it. If you're not an oyster fan, you can pickle shrimp or clams. What we have in front is all the ingredients that we need in order to do that. So the first thing we have, obviously, oysters. And then we have all the spices that we use in our pickling liquid. We use mustard seeds, fennel seeds, allspice. We use mace blade, which is really the skin that's around the nutmeg. We use apple cider vinegar and sugar. The liquid we're going to use is going to be from the oysters and also some water. I'm going to combine all these things together and bring it up to a boil. I'm going to take a moment and just crush up these allspice seeds because I want to release a little bit more of the flavor. We'll add our mace blade, our vinegar, and our sugar. We'll also add more liquid, which is going to be water, and our oyster liquid. I'm using oyster liquid here because we're going to blanch the oysters first, which is cooking them in boiling water for just a few seconds. There's positive things to it, there's also negative things to it. One of the negative things is that it releases some of the flavor, but you can reincorporate some of that flavor by adding salt. And in here, we're gonna reincorporate some of that flavor by adding some oyster liquid. The reason why blanching is important in this particular recipe is because it allows us to control the outcome. We're only pickling these oysters for about a day. So you want them to be cooked through. If we were pickling them for a month, then you cannot blanch them. But because we want to pickle them for a short period of time, then we want to blanch them, have some control, and make sure they're cooked through. Because we put oyster liquid in our pickling liquid, you're gonna have this white foam that comes up top. You just wanna skim that off. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't look good, but it tastes fine. And we like to clean it off because we like sort of a cleaner end product. If you forget to do it at home while you're figuring out and trying out these recipes and learning how to poach and blanch, it's totally fine. But for us at the restaurant, we tend to skim it off. We'll do the same thing with the pickling liquid. And we're gonna go ahead and shut this off. And we can let this liquid steep. We'll transfer it into a container that you wanna put in the fridge, and we'll let it cool for a few hours. For our blanching of our oysters, we'll bring our water up to a boil. And this is a very quick process, so don't leave the room when you do this. We'll leave it up to a boil and we'll put our oysters in. And almost as fast as you put them in, you're gonna take them out. And what we're looking for, these valves to firm up and take a little bit of shape. That's all you want. You don't want to cook the oysters completely through. We're gonna ice these down to cool them before we pour over our pickling liquid. I have ice in the bottom of my bowl. Just gonna stir it around so the heat escapes a little bit. It helps the cooling process. And once I feel like that initial sort of steam is off the oysters, I can let it sit. A single layer like this will take about 5 to 10 minutes to cool completely. Our oysters are now chilled, and the next thing we want to do is pour over the chilled pickling liquid onto our oysters, and so we can hold them and keep them. So here we have our finished pickling liquid that's been chilled. It has all our spices in it, our water, oyster liquid. We've cleared off the white foam, so you have a very clean broth. Let's give it a smell. It smells almost like pickled eggs, really. It has mustard seeds and allspice and fennel and that brininess from the oyster. You can really smell where this food has come from. It's salty, and it also smells a little sweet. We really just need this liquid to cool to below 40 degrees. So you can do that like we've done with our blanched oysters. You can cool down your liquid that way. You can set it in the fridge overnight. The longer these flavors meld together, the better the pickling liquid will taste. So if you want to keep this liquid in your refrigerator for a week, that's a great idea. I typically keep this in the fridge for about 2 to 3 days, and that's about all the time you need. Once you add your oysters to it, you can also keep the entire batch together for about a week to 10 days. So here we have our oysters and our oyster pickling liquid together, and we'll smell it. So right now, I'm smelling more of the allspice, and I'm smelling more of the mace, and which is sort of like this hint of nutmeg. And I also smell the oysters, briny, salty. And I smell a lot of vinegar. The apple cider vinegar is really starting to come through. I'm excited to see what these oysters are going to taste like now. At the restaurant, this is how we serve our pickled oysters. So first I'll plate down my saltine cracker, just plain right out the box. We wrap our oysters in lardo, which is cured pork fat. It's seasoned with a bunch of herbs, rosemary, a little salt, thyme, and oregano. Now we're going to grab a pickled oyster, have a towel handy so you can dollop some of the excess liquid off. And place that right in the center. We are going to fold our lardo over. If you're not familiar with lardo, you can go to your local butcher, you can order it online, and you can also have them slice it for you if you don't have a slicer at home. Also, an easy way to do it at home is that you can put it in the freezer, and you can take a vegetable peeler and peel pieces of lardo off. I'm gonna garnish with a little serrano chili that's been thinly sliced and some crispy chicken skin. We want to add another layer of crunch and another layer of savory to our pickled oysters, so we dehydrated some chicken skins and fried them. Add a little salt, so that just adds like a crunchy, sort of savory addition to the pickled oyster itself. It's a great thing to do for parties. You can set it ahead of time. Because the pickled oyster is wrapped in the fat, it won't make the saltine soggy. So when your guests come, you can just quickly put a plate out of pickled oysters and impress them, and it only took you about 20 minutes to make. I'll plate some more. I think a serving of 3 is a good snack. And usually that's how we do it at the restaurant. We'll give out 3 crackers or 3 oysters per serving. These are our pickled oysters on saltine crackers with lardo, serrano chili, and chicken skin. One of the things that really surprised me about moving to Savannah or moving to the Georgia coast in general was the connection to the water. One of the very first ingredients that I learned to work with in that region was oysters. And I wanted to figure out different ways to do it. I would read books from the 1930s that talked about different ways of serving oysters, either pickling them or roasting them, baking them or grilling them, but I'd never really seen them in a ham pie. And so I wanted to really embrace the fact that you can use all the ingredients in this area in whatever way you want to do it. Ham pies can be comprised of anything. What's left over from the night before, you can use that as a filling for your ham pies. So instead of doing a sweet ham pie, which you normally find in this area that has apple filling or peach filling, I wanted to do something savory, and I wanted to celebrate the coast. Let's talk about the ingredients. We have apple cider vinegar, we have sugar and salt, we have unsalted butter, so you can control the flavor. And we also have bleached all-purpose flour made of wheat. It's just sort of like your favorite flour to use. It's nothing very special about it. But the reason why we want to use this is because it gives us a lighter finished product and a flakier crust. So let's get started. I'm going to add this vinegar to my ice water and set it to the side. You want to keep everything as cold as possible. As the dough heats up, that allows for the milk solids to kind of escape within the dough, which causes the flakes. If you work with warm flour, warm water, or warm butter, it's too rapid. It doesn't give the dough time enough to heat up, develop some color, and create a crust. So you want to start with the cold ingredients, so by the time you put it in the oven, the heat is working with you and not against you. We're going to add our sugar, and we're going to add our salt. You can also make this pie crust by hand. So if you want to do it by hand, you want to mix all your dry ingredients together before you add your butter. We'll do this half the flour, half the butter, pulse it, and then we'll add the other half flour, half butter, pulse it before we combine our wet ingredients. I'm going to stick my hand in here and just make sure these butter pieces are separated. And I'm going to go ahead and pulse. You're going to pulse about 5 or 6 times. We'll add the rest. And I'm going to do the same thing. Just make sure they're all separated. Your hands will warm up the butter, so you don't want to play around with it too much. And it's nice to have like a little flour on your hands so the butter isn't in direct contact with your body heat. Here's a good opportunity to take a look at what the size of the butter should look like, and it should be about pea size. So if you have some pieces that are too big, you can kind of pick them up, run them through your fingers, and giving them a light press so they continue to break up. This flour butter mixture should be cold to touch. If it's warm to touch, stick it back in the fridge. The reason why we want the butter well incorporated, and we reference that as calling it pea-sized for visual purposes, is really so that it's fully incorporated throughout the flour, and it's really going to act as a leveling agent. There's no baking powder in here or baking soda, so as the dough cooks and the milk solids in the butter melt, it creates a gas. And that gas is what creates the layers in a flaky pastry. So we're going to add some water and vinegar to this. Vinegar also helps with creating a gas to incorporate flaky layers into a crust. I would not put vinegar in a sweet pie dough, but savory crust, it really sort of helps accent the flavor of the dough. It adds a little bit of acid, and it also helps with the flakiness. So I'm gonna go in with a bench scraper, sort of make a little bit of a well. We'll start with 2 tablespoons. We kind of pour all around, and then we want to bring it together. And we kind of want to cut into the flour and the dough, make sure the water is being incorporated. Now I'm going to add another 2 tablespoons. Baking is all really about ratios. And the easiest way to make sure that your ratio is correct is to weigh it. That will just ensure that you have all the right amount of ingredients. Incorporating water, on the other hand, is really about humidity and atmosphere. So the amount of water that I use for a pie dough can change from day to day. If it's raining outside, I may need less water because the flour is absorbing the humidity in the air. I'm putting my hands in the dough and I'm squeezing it to see if it holds together, and that lets me know if I have enough water. But the way it's crumbling, I don't have enough yet. So we'll keep adding. You want to be careful about adding too much water, because an easy way to fix it if your dough gets too soggy is to add more flour. But if it's too wet, you should just start all over, because you're just going to throw off the ratio of flour to butter. Now I'm gonna form a ball. So as you can see, it's holding together now, but it still looks a little dry, and that's okay, that's what you want. You don't want it to feel like a wet dough. You want it to still feel dry. So I'm gonna turn it out and bring the dough together. I'm sort of kneading lightly. I'm folding the dough onto itself as I'm picking up all the extra pieces of butter and flour that are trying to escape. And I'm gonna sort of form this into a ball or a disc, so it's easy for us to roll out later. So at this point, the dough is holding together. You can it's starting to feel a little sticky. The butter is starting to melt a little bit. It's firm, but it's not necessarily sticking to my fingers, which is what you want. You want it to be dry, but you don't want it to be too dry. You want some moisture there. So we're gonna wrap this dough up in plastic wrap. You can put it in a bowl and put a towel on top of it, but plastic wrap I like the best. It's easy to store. Say if you're cooking for the holidays and you want to get pie crust ready, you can make your pie dough and stick it in the freezer, and the next week you can pull out the dough, roll it out, and prepare whatever you want to prepare. So you can keep pie dough in the freezer for up to 2 months if you want. We have pulled this dough out of the fridge. It's at room temperature, and now we're gonna roll it out. So let me show you. I'm gonna take a little flour. We're gonna dust our bench with it. I call this a bench, but it's really a countertop. You can do this on a cutting board. You can do this on just a flat surface, on your dining room table if you don't have a lot of room in your kitchen. So a good amount of flour all around, just to make sure we have a complete surface covered. I'm gonna cut this dough in half. By cutting it in half, it just makes it more manageable. Gonna put a little flour on top of the dough as well. Gonna take my rolling pin and I'm gonna press down and push away. Gonna rotate my dough, press down and push away. I want about 1/4 of an inch thickness, so we'll roll out until about then. I want the dough to be as symmetrical as possible. I want it to really sort of mimic a big circle. And me rotating it helps to force the dough into the direction that I want it to go in. Okay. Doesn't quite look like a circle. It almost just looks like the ghost from Pac-Man, but that's okay. So what we want to do now is we want to cut out discs that are large enough for our filling. So I'm going to go with the 6-inch round discs cut out, which sort of looks like this. One fun thing that you can do with pie dough scraps is you can sort of cut them down to size and sprinkle them with salt, sugar, maybe serve them with a little dip, a light little sweet snack before dinner. So it's a way to save, the scraps. Now we're gonna place our disc onto a sheet tray. And we wanna pop these right back in the fridge. Keep them nice and cold. We are going to put together the filling. And we need a few ingredients to do that. We're going to have a fish fumet, which is really essentially a fish stock made of bones, carrots, celery. We're gonna add that to our pot. If you are really good at filleting fish or taking it off the bone, you can utilize those bones by creating a stock. That stock you can save for later, you can eat that day, you can freeze it. It's a really good way to just really utilize all your ingredients. To this fumet, we're gonna add some cream. And a bay leaf. We're gonna heat this mixture and reduce it by 1/3. We're going to add about 2 tablespoons of butter. We're gonna let this butter melt so we can saute our vegetables. So essentially, we're making a roux. And a roux is flour and butter, heated and cooked. You can have different types of roux. You can have a white roux, which you can have a blonde roux, you can have a dark roux, you can have a brown roux. And these are all really depend on the type of sauce that you make. Since we're using cream in our filling, we want to keep this a blonde roux. So essentially we're going to melt the butter and saute some aromatics in the butter. Our aromatics consist of onion, and fennel. You can truly use your favorite onion if you want. I really like cooking with sweet white onion. You can use shallot here if you want, whatever you really have on hand, and what's your favorite. When cooking seafood, I like to use sweeter ingredients. So I like to use fennel over celery, or sweet onion over, say, regular onion, or Spanish onion, or white onion, or shallot. Once our vegetables are sauteing, you want to stir them until they become translucent. Here, you do not want to brown the butter. So you want to keep your temperature low enough so you're not cooking too high, so the milk solids in the butter don't brown. Starting to smell that fennel, starting to smell the onion. The butter still smells very fresh, which is good. That's what you want. If it starts to smell a little toasted, you've gone too far, which is not a big deal, but you should be aware when you're cooking, your smell is also playing a part in how fast you're cooking, how slow you're cooking. Use all of your senses in order to help you pace yourself in your cooking process. One thing you should keep an eye on while you're doing this, and you have your fumet reducing in the background, when you heat cream, it tends to sort of overflow. So our cream is starting to boil, and it's starting to kind of come up to the top. And you can put a metal spoon in and stir it, or not, or reduce the heat. And I kind of like calm it down a little bit so it's not like an active volcano. Another trick we use at the restaurant is people throw a whisk in there too. And that sort of like helps calms it down. But I'm just gonna reduce the heat. So our vegetables are on the way to translucent. I'm smelling them. Everything smells nice and toasty. I'm going to add my flour to begin the cooking of the roux process. The ratios that we're working with here are equal parts. So you're using by weight or volume, equal parts butter and equal parts flour. So here we're gonna cook out our flour. You want the flour to not smell raw. And what I mean by that is it's going to start to smell a little nutty, but it's not gonna get any color yet. So it's gonna smell almost like the beginning stages of toast. That's how the flour should smell when you're ready to incorporate your liquid ingredients. Butter is one of my favorite smells, and one of my favorite things to eat is probably just butter, bread, and jam. I mean, it's simple, and everything stands on its own and speaks for itself. I really love cooking in this way. I find it very comforting. And just incorporating air into this fumet, what it does is it cools it down, but it also keeps it from overflowing. Okay, so it smells like fennel, it smells like onion, and it smells a little like raw toast. I'm gonna grab my whisk here, and I'm gonna grab my fumet, and I'm going to incorporate the two together. I'm whisking while I'm incorporating because I really don't want any lumps. So I like to add some liquid and give it a little stir to whisk out all those lumps before it gets a little too large for me to do that. So it's easier to get the lumps out at the beginning stage. It's getting nice and thick. I'm gonna go ahead and pour in the rest of my liquid. So now that I've added my cream and fumet, now we're starting to smell more like the fumet. You're starting to smell the fish from your stock. You're starting to smell a little bit of the bay leaf. So we're gonna bring this up to a boil, and we're gonna reduce it down to the thickness that we want. Here you want to watch your temperature because it can sort of bubble up on you, and I don't want you to burn yourself, so make sure you go as low and slow as you feel comfortable. But it has this velvety consistency now. It's the butter that's been added to the liquids, the cream that's in there, the flour that's sort of holding and binding it all together. The vegetables are gonna flavor that. You're gonna have a nice creamy filling for your ham pie. We wanna get the thickness right. We don't want our filling to be runny, and we also don't want it to be too thick. So we're just gonna reduce this down just a little bit. There are different phases of reduction, and for us, we're just gonna go a little bit past nappe. So one way that you can tell if something is nappé, which means it's going to stick to a fork or stick to a piece of a vegetable or a piece of protein, is you can use the back of your spoon to tell that. So I'm gonna stir this filling mixture up, and I'm gonna make sure it coats the back of my spoon. And I can take my finger or another spoon and run it down. And if they start to run into each other, then it's not quite set yet. So I wanna go a little bit longer. We're close, but we're not quite there. I'm stirring, I'm preventing it from sticking at the bottom. Low and slow always wins the race. Rushing through processes like this really don't allow the ingredients to incorporate with each other. This is looking good. Let's try that again and see if we're any closer. That's a little bit better. It's kind of standing its ground a little bit, which is what you want. You also should realize when something is hot, it's going to be way more fluid than when it cools down. So this is probably the hottest that your filling is going to be. So you want to take that into consideration as well. It's a little too thin for me. I'm going to reduce it down just a little bit more. So I'm at a medium heat right now at about 6 minutes. I think it's gonna probably be ready in another 2 or 3 minutes. But if you go to a low heat, you probably want to double that time. And you wanna cook it for 15 minutes. If I were in the restaurant, I would probably not use a wooden spoon. But I just like how they feel. I like how they feel in my hand. They just add a level of texture that I really enjoy. In the restaurant, we use really, really high heat dishwashers. So it tends to wipe off a lot of the varnish and protective oils that are in wood. So it's not really a great idea to cook with wood on a commercial level. But at home, it's really sort of one of those pleasant, nostalgic things that I remember from, cooking at home with my grandmothers or with my parents. I mean, it just looks good. It looks really nice up against this, creamy white sauce. You have this beautiful wooden spoon. It just kind of helps bring it all together. So this is the consistency that I want. It really kind of resembles like a thickened New England clam chowder. And so now I'm gonna add the remainder of my ingredients. Some Yukon Gold potatoes that we've already cooked. For a little acid, I'm gonna add in some pickled celery. You can find the recipe for the pickled celery in the class guide. So we'll add a little tarragon, some herbs. And here's where I wanna cut my heat. The tarragon's gonna work its magic. It's gonna continue to release like this delicious sort of bright, almost citrusy, sweet scent. And right after I add the tarragon, I'm gonna add a little bit of fortified wine, which in this case is going to be sherry. I do think that sherry is critical for traditional Southern seafood dishes. It's delicious with crab, it's delicious with oysters, and it's also very delicious with shrimp. So it's sort of like this natural pairing. And being in the city of Savannah, we tend to celebrate wines like Madeira and also sherry is incorporated with the cuisine. So when you think of she crab soup, there's always a little sherry in the soup. It's just one of those traditional ingredients that we really embrace in the South. Okay, I think we're all set. We'll put our filling into a bowl. We'll put some plastic wrap on top of it, and we'll let it cool down. First thing we want to do, I like to actually put a little flour down just to make sure nothing sticks. And when I say a little flour, just very little, almost more for my hands than the surface. Put down our cut disc, grab our spoon. This is about 1.5 tablespoons And I think that's all you're gonna need for this 6-inch radius disc of dough. Remember, when our mixture was hot, it was really runny. So this is cold, so it's set up. So it gives us an opportunity to place it where we want to place it and it not run anywhere or run around. So that's a good thing. We are going to we'll start with 2 oysters and we'll see if it could fit 3, because it would be nice to have a bite of oyster in each bite. These oysters are not cooked. They are raw, and they will finish cooking in the oven. So just make sure that you smell these oysters before you use them, and make sure you get them from a reliable source. We're going to take a little bit of egg wash and brush it around the edges of our dough. Then we're going to fold over and lightly press down. You can do this with your fingers. I like to take a fork and sort of press around the edges just to make sure that they're sealed. There are many oyster companies that sell oysters online that will ship to you overnight to ensure freshness. There are also a lot of responsible markets that source really well. And there you go. We will fill all 4 of these. Since we've showed you how to shuck oysters already, you can go and grab you some fresh oysters. And when you're doing that, you want to make sure that the oysters are closed. You don't want to buy oysters that are sort of pried open, like almost like they're gasping for air. That's a sign that they're not doing so hot. You also want to make sure that the place that you're buying these oysters has a tag for when the oysters were harvested. And that will let you know how long the oysters have been out of water. Because sometimes they can look really good and maybe they've been out of the water for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a long time for them to be away from their water source. Every time you buy shellfish, the person who farms the shellfish is responsible to give you sort of like a date of harvest. That's a good question to ask when you're buying fresh oysters. When were these oysters harvested? So you know how long they've been out of the water. Again, you want to work with this dough a little cold. If it's starting to warm up on you, you can easily stick it back in the fridge and get it cold again. Or if you want to move fast, you can stick it in the freezer for a minute or 2. Okay. All right, we're almost there. You're doing a great job. So now we want to finish it. And what I mean by finish it, there's going to be a few steps. The first step we want to do is make slits in the dough. I like 3 slits, so we'll just sort of do 3 little slits on the top, right across. You want to make sure it goes all the way through. And I'm not sort of like putting the knife in and dragging it. I'm almost poking it as I pull it along, just to ensure that we're getting a clean cut. And I don't want to drag it along because I don't want to mangle it. I don't want to change the shape of it. I just want it to sort of keep its shape. And these slits don't have to necessarily be large. They just need to be big enough so air can escape. The next step we're going to do is brush them with egg wash. And that is going to add some nice color to your dough. And it also is going to help the next step. This is going to give us a nice golden brown crust, a nice golden brown end result. And our last and final step, we're going to add these little special guys here. And they look like sesame seeds, and they're definitely related to sesame seeds, but these are bene seeds. And these bene seeds are from Africa, and they've been cultivated here, and we use them a lot in the cooking. We make tahini with them. We basically decorate our ham pies with them. They add a nice nuttiness. They have a great oil to them. They almost burst in your mouth. And they toast up really, really well. So this is a very special ingredient. I really love using them. People make cookies with them. People use them on toppings for eggs and bagels and avocado. And they're just like a little nuttier than a normal sesame seed. They have a little bit more flavor because they have a little bit more oil in them. And the oil is just delicious. They are very resilient. They toast really well, so you don't have to be afraid of putting them on before you initially bake your ham pies. They will be okay. They will not burn. They will get nice and toasty. Okay, there you have it. Let's go in the oven. These look pretty good. This is the color that you want. You want a nice golden brown color around the edges. You want the crust to flake up just a little bit. You want it to puff up just a little bit. And you want it to sort of be crispy on the bottom. Then you're ready to go. This is a great dish to have a lot of fun with. You can make it ahead of time. You can make it in stages. So you can make your pie dough, freeze it. Then you can find the protein that you want to use in it. It could be chicken, it could be shrimp, it can be oysters. Then you can fill these and you can freeze them even before you bake them off. So these are a great thing to do if you're having a party, you're having friends over. You can make it on your day off so you don't feel overwhelmed and you're cooking for a bunch of people all in the same day. Cooking and entertaining in the same day can just be overwhelming. So this is a good thing to do in advance to relieve some of the stress of entertaining. So we're gonna stack this up and show you how I would plate it when all my friends come over. So just have fun with it and enjoy. I hope you like this recipe and I hope that you give it a try. We've been talking a lot about roux and sauces. We cannot leave the South without talking about a very quintessential dish called gumbo. There are so many types of gumbo. You can make a gumbo just about out of anything. But the gumbo we're gonna make right now is going to be a gumbo zerbs, which I really love saying, and I just really love the history behind it. Gumbo zerbs really became popular from a Creole chef in New Orleans called Leah Chase. She would make this gumbo during Lent, and it's full of spring greens. It has cabbage in it, it has bok choy, it has dandelion greens, it also has kale, and the funny part is that it's basically a green gumbo, but it has meat in it. So it usually has like pork stock in it or pieces of pork and chicken stock. So we're going to mimic that gumbo today. It starts out with a dark roux. So with this technique, you already know what to do. You're starting out with melted butter, you're adding flour, and you're stirring to incorporate. As the butter and flour cook together, it starts to color. And the color adds flavor. So the darker your roux, the deeper the flavor. When you make a gumbo, really you want to take your time and really get a milk chocolate consistency. You should be careful because once it starts to get dark, it goes a little faster. So you want to pay attention here, and you want to make sure that you don't burn it. There's a difference between a burnt roux and a dark roux. And you want to back right up against that line and get a very dark roux. So we're going to add some onion. We're going to coat that with our roux, our bell pepper, and our celery. This is our holy trinity. I'm going to coat all those vegetables. And our variation to this holy trinity is going to be some shallots. I'm adding shallots here because I like them and also because they add a little sweetness. We are going to let that toast for a little bit and all kind of come together. Once you start to add your trinity to the roux, you really stop the coloring of the roux. So sometimes we like to add the vegetables a little too early, which will give us a lighter gumbo. Take your time so you really get that complex flavor that a gumbo has. Really, the secret to the gumbo is the roux. Now that my vegetables are nice and covered with roux and everything's cooking down, I'm gonna add in some chicken stock. I just believe that okra and gumbo are one and the same, really. In certain parts of the world, gumbo is okra. So you really can't have gumbo without it. Once it comes back up to a boil, we'll start layering in our greens. I'm gonna add my sachet, which has bay leaf, peppercorns, and allspice. The sachet will infuse those flavors in the gumbo and really deepen the flavor. I really do love okra. I love okra fried. I love it stewed. And recently, I've been really experimenting with charring it. It's really one of those vegetables that you can do a lot with, and in many ways, it's very, very delicious. I think it's pretty hot, so we're gonna go in with the okra face down. Not gonna put any oil in this pan because I really want the okra to char and I don't wanna burn it. I find that charring the okra really takes that sort of slimy quality of it down. So for folks who don't like okra because it's slimy, try charring it first and then adding it. You can char many vegetables. I really love onions charred. They really bring out the sweetness. It's very classic French technique to char an onion over an open flame and have some cloves stuck into it. You can char tomatoes. That's delicious. Eggplant, peppers. And that charness really adds a smokiness and a complexity to the vegetable that just makes it more delicious. So while our okra is charring, we are going to make sure that our gumbo is doing pretty well. We're going to layer in our vegetables so they can begin to cook down. Here's our kale and bok choy. And our cabbage. Okay, so we want to make sure everything is nice and submerged. We're gonna cover it and let it cook down for about 30 minutes. With our okra, it's nice and bright green, so we can check and see how it's doing on the other side. So this is a pretty good color. It's nice and golden, but I want it to go just a little longer. Gonna wait till the edges really start to brown up. Gonna give it a nice little press. Nice and golden brown, but we want char, so we wanna go a little longer. So this process requires a bit of patience. I mean, they're delicious now, but I really want a deeper, richer color to match the flavor of the roux and to really accent it. And I think in order for that to happen, we'll probably be cooking these okras for about 15 minutes. We're getting close. And we'll cook them on the other side. Look how beautiful the seeds look. Charred okra could be a really great snack. You can eat it with hummus or just by itself, like chips or fries. Add a little salt when they're done. Could be a nice treat. So if you have some okra in the fridge and you can't cook all of it, try charring it and eating it just like this. It's really delicious. And it's pretty healthy. There's no oil in this pan, so you're not adding any fat to it. What I really want to see is browning throughout and almost beyond that. Just a little darker than a nice brown. Want the seeds to be nice and toasted while the okra still is staying bright green. There's a good one. So we're going to flip these over. We're going to let them cook on the other side for another 5 minutes. Okay, our gumbo has been cooking for quite some time now. I'm going to give it a taste just to make sure it's ready. Delicious, really good. That roux is nice and strong. It's not quite bitter, but definitely rich. You really taste the pepper in the sachet. You taste the vegetables. The chicken stock is peeking through. It's really light. And it just feels like a big, nutritious bowl of goodness. So let's plate it up. I normally have rice with my gumbo. Some people like their gumbo with potato salad, which I think is really delicious. You can also have gumbo with cornbread. I'm gonna top it with some charred okra. This is gumbo zerbs with charred okra.